So, welcome to the panel. Today, we're going to be talking about minimum wage, healthcare, and welfare. I'll narrow it down a little bit. I know saying like welfare is a broad topic, but we'll narrow it down a little bit. Each topic, I'll give a specific question. I think I already had posted in the chat for all of you to see. That's pretty much just going to be the wording of the question. I gave you guys some prep time if you wanted it. No, not many rules. Just don't speak over me, the moderator. Don't constantly interrupt to the point where it's like basically ruining the conversation or ruining any like real conversation being had. But other than that, you're free to go. So I'll ask you all a question on each topic. So we'll start like topic one. You'll all take turns. You all take turns, and then we can go to kind of just an open debate. Sound good?
Yep.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right. Um, we'll go for our first topic, which is minimum wage. We'll start with Habeas Humor. Do you support having a minimum wage? If not, why? If you do, then what would your ideal minimum wage be?
Great. Thank you so much. And should I introduce myself first?
Yeah, so everyone can introduce themselves or promote themselves as well. Yeah.
Hi. So my name is Sharon. I have a law and politics show called Habeas Humor. I went and put the link in the chat, and you can find it on YouTube, or if you are just an audiophile, you can add it to your podcast app. My personal background is that I was born and raised in Oakland, California. I currently live near Akron, Ohio. Politically, I am a minarcho-socialist according to the Compass test. I am a straight cis woman. My pronouns are she, her. I have a professional background as an attorney with a little bit of journalism and other stuff thrown in. I don't I do not value capitalism or the accumulation of vast amounts of
Hey,
personal wealth.
sorry to
Wait,
interrupt, but FF&I,
yeah, I'm
could you
sorry.
put on push to talk, dude? I can hear your fan and your typing, but I can't hear.
I can hear the
Typing and
internal
while
components
talking.
of your laptop.
Yeah, dude.
Sounds great now. Is there
Okay,
anything I
yeah.
should repeat, or did people get the gist?
Can I get your name again? I do apologize.
No worries. Sharon, my show is Habeas Humor. You can call me either. Sharon is kind of like the song. Um, And yeah, I was just gonna say, like, before I answer the question about like what I should think the policy should be about minimum wage, I was just going to talk about my values a little bit.
Yep,
I
that's
am
fine.
a socialist. I want to make sure, I don't value capitalism. I don't value the accumulation of vast amounts of personal wealth. So that is why, you're not going to hear me say anything like protect the wealth of people like Elon Musk. I don't value protecting anyone's personal property over the survival and comfort of the general population. So obviously, the policies that I advocate for are going to be with that in mind. I believe in taking from the wealthy as much as necessary for the survival and comfort of the general population. I believe it's unacceptable and immoral to make things that are necessities inaccessible or cost prohibitive to people. And I believe that personal fulfillment and mental health are more important than being a hard worker. And I believe people should not have to, work anywhere near as hard or as much as most Americans think. So that's kind of where I come from when I think about policy. I definitely, I mean, we don't have any environmental issues, at least directly on the agenda, but I do value reversing the greenhouse effect on the environment by just about any means necessary. Um, as far as having a minimum wage, um, let me just say first that for this and for every other topic we cover tonight, minimum wage, UBI, etc., I am going to argue in favor of policies that I would want if there was never going to be any getting rid of capitalism in the United States. As I already said, I am a socialist, so if I really had my druthers, I would address issues such as the minimum wage by like scrapping our whole capitalist system and turning the US into a socialist country. However, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm not going to advocate that way because that would pretty much foreclose all other discussion and then we would just be debating socialism versus capitalism. So I'm going to answer everything assuming the continuation of the toxic, shitty capitalist system we currently have in the US. And under this system, we absolutely need a minimum wage. Minimum wage. We need minimum wage because it has been empirically proven that individuals do not have anywhere near enough bargaining power to make fair trade deals in selling their labor to employers. And this inequality gets more dramatic the further down you go in the labor hierarchy. Even now, when there is minimum wage in every part of the US, there are still millions of people selling their labor with not enough to show for it. And if you were to go back through history to the period where there was no minimum wage, and there was no overtime laws or other protection for employees, you would then see millions of people working 10 plus hour days and making barely enough to maintain even an impoverished lifestyle. Those people are being stolen from. And just like with every other case of theft, there are two solutions: fix it through the government or fix it through the guillotine. I think making it the law that employees have to earn enough to live comfortably is a better solution than chopping off rich people's heads. So, I mean, you're free to try and change my mind. Um, did you want me to go into what I think the minimum wage should be, or is that going to be like round two?
Uh, yeah, you can also say that.
All right. Minimum wage needs to be enough for one full time employee to, at the very least, support just themselves in whatever region they live and work in. And the case could be made that the minimum wage should be enough for like one full time employee to be able to support a family of four. I mean, I could make that case. I'm not going to, because that would keep it kind of easy on myself tonight. I'm going to say that 40 hours a week should yield enough after tax pay for a person to rent a one bedroom apartment. Now, the cost of living is different everywhere. I ran some numbers using a model based on, let's say, a one bedroom apartment costs $1,000 a month, round number. Obviously, there are places in the US where a one bedroom apartment costs way more than that or way less than that. But for someone who rents an apartment for $1,000 a month, their weekly rent would be $230.75. I did the math. To qualify for an apartment, you usually have to have take home pay equal to 3 times your rent. And that's also more or less the ratio that financial planners recommend for budgeting. So, therefore, a person paying $230.75 a week in rent needs to take home about $692 a week after taxes. And if we assume that 20% of gross pay is going to state and federal taxes, then gross pay would have to be $865 a week. That works out to an hourly wage of $21.63. That's roughly 3 times the current federal minimum wage. And why, the reason why is that the federal minimum wage and most state minimum wages have not kept up with the rising costs of living. And it has gotten so bad that in order to be corrected, we need this dramatic change of basically tripling the minimum wage. It's not a ripoff to employers, it's not a handout to workers. It is the minimum wage that a person needs. And if you cannot afford to pay that to your employees, then don't hire them. Don't steal their labor for inadequate compensation. And for anyone who says this cannot be done, I say no, it is already happening. The state of Virginia, for example, has enacted a law that will raise the minimum wage in stages. It is scheduled to reach $15 an hour in 2026, better late than never. And then every year after 2026, in the law in Virginia says that the minimum wage has to be adjusted annually based on the consumer price index. So it is happening ever so slowly, but it is happening. And that is all I have to say about that. Thank you.
All right. Next, liberal Cluck.
Well, I'm Liberal Cluck. I stream on YouTube and Twitch at Liberal Cluck. Uh, I basically am here just for blood sports. I'm not sure how much we're gonna get from this panel tonight, but yeah, my opinion on minimum wage is that first of all, I am not a socialist. I consider myself I guess you would probably say sock down or social democrat or democratic socialist. Don't really know the difference. Um, but I do believe that there are market failures, and the labor market is definitely one of the market failures. Employers have way more power when it comes to negotiating labor price than employees do. I believe that minimum wage is a imperfect solution to a market failure. And by imperfect, I mean it's like if you have a cut and you only have scotch tape and tissue to fix it. That's kind of what I mean when I say imperfect. I would much rather like unionization to be more widespread in America. But in the absence of that, I think minimum wage is probably the best we got. It's got its issues. Obviously, on the federal level, not every state has the same cost of living, so having a blanket minimum wage probably isn't going to be the most effective way of doing this. Maybe having a blanket standard of living you require each state to have their minimum wage might be more effective. But that's something that nobody ever really talks about. It's either yes or no for most people, black and white. Yeah, that I think that's pretty much my little spew for minimum wage.
All right, cool. Econoboi.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Econoboi. I am a SOCDEM economics type YouTuber. Pretty much make informative economics content, and I also sell Picklelyme illegal firearms. In terms of my opinion on the minimum wage, I would say that my general opinion on the minimum wage is that, similar to what Liberal Cluck said, is that it's kind of an imperfect solution to a problem. So for instance, I would say that in America, minimum wage is fairly necessary because we don't have as powerful a unionization or worker representation front as there are in other countries. Oftentimes, conservatives will cite, like the Nordic countries that don't have a minimum wage, or even Switzerland or things like that, to show that we don't need a minimum wage. But it's not really the most reasonable citation because obviously those countries have pretty strong unionization and worker representation, so they don't really need it as much. The minimum wage is really nothing more than a statement on, what should the person who is obtaining employment be able to get at a minimum in order for there to be a fair relationship between that employee and the employer. And so right now, the federal minimum wage is 725. I think it's probably important to point out that, the 725, most people don't make 725. If you take all the state minimum wages and sort of do a weighted average, the actual minimum wage that most people face is about $10 an hour, which is pretty decent. So going to 15 wouldn't be the most unreasonable thing, but I think people have to recognize that the local cost of living can get kind of out of whack at a $15 an hour minimum wage, and it's just something that's worth compensating for. So like, if you're doing $15 minimum wage in Mississippi, where the median income is below $15 an hour, it's probably going to be a lot harder for businesses to absorb that cost in Mississippi than it is in like New York or Florida or California, some of the bigger states with higher costs of living. And so it's really a more nuanced conversation. I do support the minimum wage in general. As far as what it should be, I think right now I'm kind of softly in favor of maybe a $15 minimum wage, but with some sort of local cost of living subsidy or something like that. I'm not quite sold on a $15 minimum wage countrywide. I would say that if I was in Congress and a $15 minimum wage countrywide was put in front of me, I would vote for it. But if I had, Econoboy's utopia, I would probably pick something a little bit more nuanced, and that's where I'm at.
All right, cool. Next is Fresh Faces, New Ideas.
Yeah, so best I'm gonna do is just be muted when I'm not talking, so hopefully it's not too bad in the background. Anyway, my name is Fresh Faces New Ideas. I am a SOCDEM. I consider myself like a Bernie Bro type political streamer. I stream mostly on Twitch. I used to do a little on YouTube. So for minimum wage, I think we need it, and I do think it needs to be raised. There was just a CNN article that was covering this like 2 days ago. I was going over as it stands now. Only 7 counties in the country or can you afford a one bedroom on the 725 minimum wage? I do agree with Econobo. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. It should not be the same across the board. There are certain places like California where you need something closer to 25, 30 versus somewhere in like a state where the cost of living is less. So I think it should need to be raised, and I think that having it is important for the system that we currently have.
All right, nice. Next is Petrus, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, it's Petrus. So my name's Petrus. I'm a Groiper. I'm a nationalist, and my position on the minimum wage is that it shouldn't be raised. And my reasoning for that, although I do value the wages of workers, is because if we do raise the minimum wage, it will put a strain on businesses, and they will not be able to hire as many people, thus creating a large unemployed population. The goal of having a high minimum wage is to raise the average wage for the average person, obviously. But if there aren't any jobs, it's not exactly going to happen. However, I do have a way that we can raise the wages in the United States without having to manually raise the minimum wage. And the two things that you can do is that you can cut off immigration and you can encourage protectionist policies such as tariffs on foreign goods so that local businesses can have more jobs, thus increasing the supply of jobs, which would raise wages.
All right. Thanks. Next is Sneed.
Howdy, y'all. My handle is at GutsPeople. I would guess a libertarian, but doing the political test, I happen to. I think it was a variety of socialism, which I'm not against. For the minimum wage, I believe that we do have to have a minimum wage due to the fact that at the current moment of time we have, and I could be wrong in some regards of it, but the idea that we have subsidized the minimum wage to the states while still holding on to the idea that the government can control it. So the reason being that at the current moment of time, we have a $7.25 minimum wage, while private companies such as Amazon start off at $15 an hour. And through the individual companies being able to go above minimum wage, individual states don't have to do I would say, a effort to raise it. And perhaps it's due to the fact that it would save the federal government money, but that's my take on it.
All right, and finally, Syrus.
Yes, hello. My name is Syrus. I consider myself to be a rural sockdom. It's basically a regular sockdom, but with more focus towards farmers and more benefits to farmers and stuff like that, since I do live in a rural community in real life. And when it comes to well, actually, before I get into my thoughts on minimum wage, the reason I'm here is because I will admit I'm not the best at debating, but I do enjoy participating in debates and discussions like this, and I'd like to thank Picklelyme for having me on because this is my first ever panel of this sort of thing. So I hope to learn a lot of information today, regardless on how I perform. But anywho, on minimum wage, I did a lot of research for this because I did a 25-minute presentation as my senior year of high school, and basically what my research concluded is that we should have a $15 minimum wage. There is some evidence supporting the contrary, but I feel like there are much more pros than there are cons. For example, first of all, the last minimum wage increase in America was 2009. Well, the year is 2021, and inflation and the cost of living and has gone up while there is no wage increase. The raise in minimum wage would also address long-standing racial and gender inequities. According to Oxfam America, it would benefit 40% of Black and Latino women, 38% of African American workers, 33% of Latino workers, and 32% of women workers. The third reason is it would reduce poverty and it would also fuel economic growth, but I think we'll get more into that as this debate progresses. And then my final two reasons quickly are it would save taxpayer money and reduce use of government programs. For example, if you have the minimum wage, people would be out of poverty, then there would be no need for things like food stamps and SNAP benefits, and then that would save government spending. And then my final reason, it's what the vast majority of Americans want. It is the populist option if you do consider yourself a populist. There are multiple polls saying this, and those are my opening statements.
All right, cool. Thank you everyone for giving opening statements. We'll actually be transitioning into an open debate now. So if you have disagreements with another person's statement, you can, call them out and just open platform.
Okay. So those of you who are like minimum wage supporters, I've got to take the other side of this because there's just not enough people here that are anti minimum wage. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and argue against it with my gripes on the minimum wage. So for those of you that are like for minimum wage, you think that this is the way we should be doing wages in America, surely there has got to be, like, in your mind, something better we could be doing. Like you've got to know what the problems are and know that there are better alternatives, right?
Such as what?
I mean, I think a couple of us already mentioned that we'd prefer a more unionized or worker representative model in order to distribute wages, but in a political system, you always have to account for that axis of the problem, not just the economic axis. I mean, it's a democratic system, so you have to kind of figure out what can we actually get passed and what's best for the economy, and those two things don't always mesh well. So that's why I said that. Obviously, you'd probably prefer a more Nordic style system where you got worker representation, unionization, and no minimum wage versus the opposite in America. But in America, we've got a minimum wage. It seems like people are more amicable to a minimum wage reform than like restructuring the entire labor market. So, raise the minimum wage seems to be the most expedient thing to do.
Well, it is
Well, could you
expedient.
consider the fact that it would cause problems with the whole, or would you consider the jobs argument that I brought up a second ago? I mean, are you really achieving your goal if, I mean, right now in America, right, our industries, right, such as our manufacturing industries, you know what I mean, where we used to have cars in a lot of these cities or whatever, we used to have, all sorts of things being made. Um, and those jobs went away because the American corporations are no longer competitive to foreign corporations. And so, so you're going to put more strain on jobs in America? I mean, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I don't think you're really going to get your goal of having high wages if if you don't have jobs.
Those jobs
Well,
did not go away
yeah,
because
sure.
wages were too high. Those jobs went
Amazon.
away because employers, especially the big corporations, found ways to lower their costs of labor. They will always try to lower their cost of labor. So,
No, those jobs are in China now. I mean, we used to everything is made in China. You look at I mean, not everything literally, but you look at all of your plastic, most of your appliances, everything is made in China now. You know what I mean?
you're making
And
my point for
China,
me. Costs are low and regulations are low. If you want to hire people in America and if you want to make stuff in America, we may not have the best labor protections and environmental protections, but we're better than China. So it's going to cost more. But these companies are not going broke. They have record profits.
I
They
know that
just
they're not going broke. What they're doing is that they're moving their jobs to places like China or Mexico or whatever because they have lower wages there. And so if we're
Well,
going to raise wages, those jobs will go away. And
they're
so I
already gone, I
understand
think.
that
So
you would no, yeah, if you raise job or if you raise wages as raises wage or sorry, as
why can't this be?
wages raised in the second half of the 20th century and the jobs went away. And so in reality, you can have, I know that it doesn't sound good to have low wages. And what I'm saying is that you can actually, in the situation, you can actually have your cake and eat it too. And what you can do is that you can put tariffs on foreign goods and try to lower the amount of people within the labor force by encouraging women to go back to the home and encouraging immigration to, stop being at record highs. And so by doing that, you can raise wages while keeping jobs in the United States.
So
I
you're
definitely
speaking out
disagree with.
of
Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
you're speaking you're saying two very contradictory things. You're saying on the one hand we want lower wages, we want competitive wages to get these jobs back, but you're also saying we want to eliminate half the workforce, put women back in the home, and restrict immigration so that wages go up. And so you can't really have it both ways.
Well, no,
You
you
have to
can
pick
have
one.
it both ways. You don't actually have to. What I'm saying is that if we just raised the minimum wage, what would happen is the jobs would leave. However, I
So the
know,
problem, but
right?
Petrus, the
I'm
problem is,
presenting with
well,
tariffs.
really quick
I'm
though. I
presenting with.
think you're
Fine,
Petrus
go
can
you're
ahead.
thinking
finish.
you're Well, you're begging the question, right? I mean, there's not been any evidence that raises in the minimum wage have like cost jobs to a significant degree, and there's never been any link between any offshoring of jobs and the minimum wage increasing. I mean, at the time when most of these jobs were offshored after NAFTA, you're talking about a time when the minimum wage was what, $4 or $5 an hour. I mean, the minimum wage was lower back then than it was now. You can talk about inflation or purchasing power, whatever you want, but the point is that these links have not been established, and it's not been established in any developed country with a much higher minimum wage that after they've had a much higher minimum wage increase than we've had, that they've had a significant offshoring of jobs.
Well, I'll give you evidence right now, right? Why? Think about it like this:
And
why do they
even
put jobs in China, right? In China, they have like, they basically have like what borders on slave labor. You know what I mean? They have these people. I mean, of course, you've got the like the Amazon suicide net meme where it's like, these people were trying to commit suicide because they hated their, basically being slaves so much. Like you cannot compete with chattel slavery, right? And so the issue is that in order for us to fix the situation, in order for us to have high wages and lots of jobs at the same time, we have to put tariffs on foreign goods. I understand that you guys want to have high wages, and I agree with you. That's a goal that we should have. However, raising the minimum wage is not the way to do it. The way to do it is
So,
raising tariffs.
so Petrus, one thing about tariffs is that if do you know what the concept of comparative advantage is?
Yeah, I know about the concept of comparative advantage. That's where, one country is better at doing something than something else. However, there's not really anything that makes China. I mean, that makes sense if you have like towns or whatever. It doesn't make sense to grow things in the winter or like in a tundra or a desert or whatever. And it doesn't make sense to manufacture things underwater. But I mean, America has the capacity to have jobs again. I mean, we have the capacity to have factory jobs again. We had them just even before NAFTA, before the Rust Belt. We had all sorts of manufacturing jobs. We had the largest car industry on the planet. You know what I mean? We used to have Ford and all these other giant companies, and now all of our cars in the United States, or at least like most of them, are produced overseas. They're produced in Germany, they're produced in Japan, they're produced in China, whatever. And now, or they're produced in Mexico. You know what I mean? And so we have the ability to do this. Okay, we don't have to. I mean, comparative advantage makes sense when you actually do have a comparative advantage. But the only comparative advantage that China has over the United States is the fact that they have extremely low wages because they abuse their workers.
Why do
Well,
you
they
figure the
also
Germans are
Oh,
able to manufacture
wait,
cars?
wait. I want to hear from. Actually, you can answer that, but I also want to hear from Fresh Faces New Ideas. Has been trying to chime in.
Oh, sorry, you can go ahead. It's fine.
Oh, I was just since
oh, I was
Germany
just
was raised. But go ahead, go ahead.
Right. I mean, we kind of moved a little past this point. I wasn't ready to talk about tariffs, but like to the idea that wages have cost jobs. When Amazon raised their wages in their area, first of all, it raised it competitively, and the job loss ended up being 0.4%. So we're not talking about like a large loss of wages. The wages we have now in before Walmart has to raise their wages, their people would work full time at their salary and still be required for food stamps. Like this idea that these jobs would just vanish is not going to happen because these companies are so massive, they still need the labor. So the question is, are they going to bury all the smaller companies by not having competitive wages, or are they just going to force people into these like slave-like cattle conditions?
Uh, as an Amazon worker, I would slightly argue on that based off of policy. Recently, due to COVID and somewhat worker shortages, we've been, sorry about this, for incentives to stay at work, they've offered the idea of $1,000 bonuses between periods of months. This one was due to the fact of Amazon, I believe it was Prime or Peak. Uh, Other standards of that would be at the current moment in time because of the worker shortage, because the increase in uh, I forget what it's called. Can someone unemployment benefits, correct?
yeah.
So due to unemployment benefits going higher, let's put in the state of New Jersey. At my facility, we need about this was 3 weeks ago, so maybe 80 more workers to be taken off of overtime schedules, which are uh, non sequitur. So it'd go 1 week, we would have 5 days. The following week, we would have four. In some parts of the nation, Tennessee, for one instance, they've gone to the point it's been, I think, multiple months of going on this system, where New Jersey, we just got off it due to being done our season of like big business. But the only way to counteract all this would be to take away the fact that states are able to allow people to negotiate for what the company is paying and willing to pay for versus what the state is, and force it onto the federal minimum wage. It would cause prices to go down nationally. Now, it may also cause poverty, but that is not my expertise.
Well, sure. I think one thing to mention is that at the end of the day, all these free trade agreements, what you end up seeing over a long time horizon is wages go up, right? People transition from one job to another, and what you do see is localized losses that aren't properly accounted for by, you know, these bigwig economists. Obviously, even Paul Krugman, the NAFTA free trade guy, he would even say that. But to say that we should shut our doors to trade, or we should increase tariffs, or put women back in the home so that they're not working anymore, is not the most reasonable economic position relative to increasing the minimum wage for the first time in a decade and a half, to a point when in most states you could probably have a bit more purchasing power if you increase the wage. That's all. I mean, to react so radically and so counter to sort of the given economic theories is a little absurd.
Something else to take into consideration also, this idea that we're going to get manufacturing back in America is kind of absurd, because it wasn't necessarily China that took away most of the manufacturing jobs. It was automation. Automation is the single most driver of a lot of manufacturing jobs going away.
Right. Well, then why are these factories? Why aren't they just? If these factories, if it's due to automation, I understand automation is a problem. But why are most of these factories are not like converting into like automotive industries? Or sorry, that's not what I meant. Like they're not automating. What they're doing is that they're just leaving where they are right now. What's that noise? That's really loud. Do you guys hear that too?
It's
Yeah.
One
looks
second.
like it's you.
Give me like half a second. I'm gonna mess with my headphones. We'll be right back.
Sure.
I still hear it.
Yeah, I still hear it.
Hold on, let me see it.
That's weird.
Okay, so
Pickle, do you hear that like
I hear it. Yeah.
white noise?
Nobody's got an open mic.
How about we leave the
feel like
call and rejoin back in?
Yeah, I think everyone muted and you still hear it.
Okay, it's gone.
That was weird.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. It's fine now. I don't know why I did that. Who was talking?
That was
Just
Peters.
Yeah, I was. Oh, yeah. So, like a lot of these factories, right? If they were really just converting to if they really were just automating, right? They wouldn't be packing up and moving. Like I don't have a statistic for this, but like at least from a personal perspective, I live in a Rust Belt city, and I've lived in Rust Belt cities my entire life, or most of it, and I see these just abandoned factories everywhere. You know what I mean? You go to Detroit, you see these giant just husks of buildings. You know what I mean? These are not becoming more efficient the same way that, like, for example, the shipping industry did a long time ago when they stopped having workers there at the docks who would bring things back and forth because they got all their giant tools to do that. I forget what the cranes, etc. But these factories are just leaving. They're leaving overseas. They're leaving to places like Mexico and China. Even in Europe, because the Europeans used to dominate this because they outcompeted us in the second half of the 20th century. Now they're even moving their factories to places like Mexico and China. And so it's really just because these places mistreat their workers. And if we're ever going to compete, our options are either to put tariffs on these foreign goods or treat our workers like shit. And I think the tariffs are the preferable option.
we don't need to compete with these countries for manufacturing jobs. We can just give them manufacturing. That's the beauty of free trade. We can do what we're good at, and they can do what they're good at, and
That's
they're
the
able
issue
to
is
they're
that
no no they're
No,
able to
That's comparative
manufacture
advantage.
goods. Yeah,
wait,
they're
Liberal
able to
Cluck can finish, and then Petrus can respond.
they are
they
able
have
to
no comparative advantage. Oh, sorry, my bad. I thought you were.
Okay, so they are able to manufacture goods cheaper than we are because of their low labor costs. But let's not, and I will agree that the conditions in places that are like China and Indonesia and places where we get these cheap labors for, they're not the greatest, but they have improved because of free trade. When it comes to free trade, both countries are getting something out of it. We get cheaper goods and they get jobs that they no longer they didn't have before we became a trade partner with them.
Here's the thing: is that their competitive advantage or their comparative advantage. Usually, when people say comparative advantage, they're referring to the fact that it doesn't really make sense for America to be growing. You know, we can't really do a banana industry as well as like the Central Americans can, because we the only place that really has that climate to do that is Florida, and I understand it from that perspective. But a thing like manufacturing used to employ a huge amount of the American population. The only reason that manufacturing is no longer viable is because foreign businesses are outcompeting American businesses because they have such low wages. And so, I mean, we don't have to. I mean, it's not like it's impossible for us to have these manufacturing jobs back. You're acting as if, well, they just have a comparative advantage that makes them better all the time. Uh, I mean, that's not true. We were dominating, for example, the automotive industry just 40 years ago. I mean, it's not like we just can't. It's not like we're just gonna lose every single time. We just have to protect our industry.
Okay, but when you calculate comparative advantage, you are calculating how many goods a country can make with a certain amount of resources. And China's just able to make more goods with less resources than we are. Human resources is one of the resources that are calculated into this equation. And yes, it's because they have cheap labor, but that is a part of the equation. It means that we get more goods and China gets more jobs that they didn't used to have. Both countries are benefiting in this. It's just that one aspect of the American economy is suffering, which is manufacturing. But we don't necessarily need manufacturing in order to have high paying jobs.
I think this whole outsourcing discussion is a red herring because companies in America have been outsourcing for decades and they will continue to do so whenever they can. I don't think there's any adjustment you can make to wages either upwards or downwards that will make companies not continue to outsource whenever they can, and I'm certainly not interested in lowering wages to compete with China and India and Saipan and places like that, nor am I interested in raising tariffs sky high. I'm not an economist, but it really doesn't sound like a good idea. First of all, it just means that, if imports to America cost that much, then the companies will focus on selling elsewhere in the world and Americans will go without, or prices will go up in America. And since wages aren't going up, you're just impoverishing the average American consumer. So the
So America is one of the largest markets on earth. We have more people in America than I think what we're the maybe the third or the fourth largest country from a population perspective on earth. Companies are not just going to ignore the American market because of tariffs. What will happen is that American corporations will be the ones selling in the American market. What will not happen, I mean, things will go up. The price for foreign produced products will go up, yeah. However, the price for products that are within the United States won't. And so what will happen is that the consumer will therefore pick the goods that are produced in the in America and that have been produced by American workers. And so what we're
Well,
doing is that we're
but you're not.
protecting
But you're
our.
you're totally ignoring the second half of the discussion. Like you're okay. So one, you haven't proven that minimum wage actually costs jobs. You've just vaguely pointed to jobs being outsourced, right? And two, we've pointed to multiple examples and facts. The idea that wages have increased since these free trade agreements have come online. More jobs have been created. Unemployment rates has been static depending on the business cycle, depending on where you're exactly looking, which is to say that it's functionally structurally unchanged. But you haven't proven that minimum wage actually causes any of these things. And then that's not to mention, you've said, well, minimum wage costs jobs. Well, guess what costs jobs? Tariffs do, right? Because when everything gets more expensive, people don't have as much purchasing power. That means money doesn't circulate as well, right? And that's been proven when Trump, to his odd credit, the idea that he's countered an economic narrative, he did implement more tariffs than many presidents had previously. And what did we see? We saw very structurally, we did see people who weren't able to get jobs, or we did see lower job growth than we would have otherwise, all else equal, because of those tariffs. And the amount of protected jobs versus the number of jobs potentially lost was a lot less. And so you're not drawing any bright lines here. You're vaguely asserting that these things are true, but the story doesn't seem to come together.
So I'll explain to you why the minimum wage would hurt jobs. So first of all, right, what I
Well,
said
no,
about the
don't explain it
outsourcing.
to me. Just point to some evidence saying that it will. I understand what you're saying. You're saying that if we make the cost of hiring higher, that means that companies will go where the cost of hiring is lower. I understand what you're saying. What I am saying is that you've presented no real evidence that the minimum wage causes that to happen.
Well, how do you not follow my logic though? I mean,
So
that's like a very
well,
basic economic concept. That
well,
the
your
idea that
logic is
companies will move.
irrelevant when it's logic doesn't
No, dude,
matter when it's in the face of.
I do not have a source on the top of my head about that. However, I think it's actually a really simple concept, and it makes perfect sense. Something
Well,
kind of like
but logic. Well,
how
you didn't let me finish the your logic doesn't logically what you're saying. I'm not saying it's illogically structurally unsound what you're saying. What I'm saying is it's just not true though, right? The empirics don't agree with what you're saying, right? You have to answer the empirics before you can refer back to your logic.
okay.
I
Well,
don't care about your logic. I care more about the evidence.
do you have a
I
source that
can
says that raising the minimum
I
wage will will
Actually, I have a
expand the amount of
source, so
jobs
if
or
I if
what?
I can jump in real quick.
Okay, yeah, sure. Show me your source, bro.
All right.
I have
So,
multiple if you
actually,
need.
this was on sorry, Fresh. I'll let you in right after me. But okay, so actually, this was on MSNBC about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But basically, there was I think it was in Pittsburgh, but there was this one ice cream um ice cream trunk company, and the owner only had like 3 workers, and he was trying to find a way to get more workers. He tried everything. He tried massively advertising. He even went to the extremes of going to his competitors and saying, "Hey, do some of your employees want to split their shifts with me?" Then it finally dawned upon him that if he just raises the minimum wage to $15 in a city like Pittsburgh, by the way, that maybe he'll get employers. And when he raised his wage, he had within 1,000 applicants within 24 hours, and he just cut it there because but yeah, so basically the point I'm trying to make is there has been more cases like this, not only in Pittsburgh, but other places that raising the minimum wage does spark consumer demand, which does enable people to retain or hire new employees.
So not only is that like totally anecdotal, but I would say that like in certain
It's empirical.
individual.
Okay.
Here's the issue, right? So in like an individual business, it might make sense for them to raise their wage, right? I'm not opposed to businesses raising their wages on a personal level. However, if the government forces every one of these businesses to raise their wages, a lot of corporations, a lot of small businesses, will go out of business, and a lot of large corporations who are producing things, the industrial jobs, the people who go out and make things, they're just going to move to places where the minimum wage is not so high. And so what you're
Okay, but
doing is that
again, you're saying that with no evidence. You're saying
oh
they're
no,
just going to
how do I
move
not have? How are you not following my logic, dude? That's such a
Okay,
simple,
no, but
totally
Petrus,
self-evident thing.
Petrus, really
Yeah,
quick.
that's not
I
how
don't
evidence
think
works.
you're understanding
So the
what I'm what I'm saying is that, well, really quick if I can. So I understand what he just said was a bit anecdotal. I just posted a book which is basically a huge meta-analysis on the effects of minimum wages and stuff like that. What they found was that the minimum wage being increased comes with fairly modest effects on employment. It can be higher, it can be lower, depending on the increase. Right now, obviously, all else equal, if employment stays the same, you'd want the minimum wage to be as high as possible because people are getting jobs and just at higher wages. Right now, the point is though is that your logic is one thing, but you have to make a positive case that once people raise the minimum wage, then companies go offshore. You can say that they do that. The empirics are against you in this regard. There's
Well, I
no
would.
developed
So first of all,
nations
you
that.
posted like some
Or Petrus, you can
think tanks
respond.
thing about it.
You can respond, but
Okay.
after you
Posted a
respond, I want to let
academic
Fresh Faces
journal.
talk.
Okay, yeah. So not only did you just post some like think tanks like article in the chat, which I mean,
Some
whatever. I'm sure I
book
could
about
find like.
minimum wage. That shit's useless. I mean, come on, dude, get out of here.
I mean
Like some guy that
the
studies minimum wage for a living. What does he know about minimum wage?
I
I mean, get
guarantee you,
out of
dude,
here.
I could
You
find
asked
some like fucking
you
lab coat
asked for a
talking about it.
source. I
But
provided a
I'm
source.
explaining to you and like
Well, economists don't
I
wear
think
lab coats, to be fair.
okay, whatever. I mean, people who come up with these sources all day. I'm sure I could find a million about like my specific thing. However, I'm explaining to you
Damn
from
sources.
like a logic perspective,
Yeah.
right? This is like I'm asking you to just like follow the idea. So first of all, right, businesses are trying to compete with other people, right?
Well, you're
And
repeating
so
yourself now. I mean,
yeah, I'm repeating myself because I feel like this is pretty simple to understand. I mean, can you find a logical flaw with what I said?
I've already
Yeah,
said I
Petrus.
can't find a logical flaw. I'm admitting the logic makes sense, but what I'm saying is that like, okay, for instance, right? Some people would say that if you have more labor, wages will go down, all else equal. That's why we shouldn't have immigration. But what you find is that when you have more immigration, demand goes up, and so it cancels out a lot of the compressing effects on wages. It makes these problems very hard to study, and so your logic from A to B to C isn't like internally inconsistent, but based on the empirics and all of the dynamics of the economy, it doesn't actually bore out. It's more complicated than what you're saying. And that's
So
why you
explain
have
to
to
me
come up
why
with a
a
better
business
case
Wait,
for it.
wouldn't
we're
move.
we're going we're
Explain to me
going
why.
we're going in circles, so I really need to let Fresh Faces talk because he did want to say something.
Can I go after that?
Yep.
Yeah. So look, a lot of what's happening is we're asking for evidence to prove the things that you're saying, and you're just giving us "I feel" statements, and we're providing you with evidence. So the general knowledge of the history of how this has worked is the most of the data proves that raising the minimum wage does not have a overall negative impact on workers. For example, when they were discussing this for the rescue package, it was projected that it would raise some 17 million people out of poverty. So that is a net positive there. And like I've already stated with the Amazon numbers, there's other numbers if you look into when Walmart was forced to raise their wages, they didn't lose workers in the way you say. So the logic might be there, but if the data isn't there to follow it, it doesn't matter. Because logically, if you look at an airplane, it shouldn't be able to fly. But the science and the facts of it make it work. So just because you have a thought process that is A to B to C is logically sound, it doesn't mean that the people who look at this and crunch the numbers to give you the empirical data are backing up your logical point. So that's what we're really asking you for is we're not saying your logic is wrong. We're saying the data that you are trying to drive your logic from doesn't exist.
Okay, well, I'd like you to apply your logic or your sources, right? And I want you to explain to me why a business wouldn't move, if a business could, why it wouldn't move to somewhere else if the other place has lower wages. Like, why would a factory job just not move to somewhere else if it has a lower cost of operation?
Because the people are more educated, they're more productive. I mean, that's been the story
You
of
really
many
need to be
developed countries.
educated. You really think we need to be educated to like do a factory job?
Well, but number one, I wouldn't insult the intelligence of factory workers. They're technically trained employees, but I would also say that is generally why. Like, for instance, a lot of conservatives it's conflicting for a lot of conservatives the idea of damn, these Nordic countries have such high taxes. Why do companies even why do they even exist in these countries with such high taxes? Well, one reason is that they actually have very low business taxes, and the second reason is that they have a very highly educated, very highly productive workforce. And so again, that's where your logic of lower wages here, therefore, more jobs, more companies here. Like, I understand the logic might be, internally consistent, but there's a lot more dynamics to the economy than obviously just what has higher and lower wages. I mean, by that logic, why does the U.S. have literally any companies in it, right? I mean, shouldn't
Well,
every
because
single
not all
company be in
companies
DC?
are not all companies are a lot of companies are not like producing things, right? Well,
Well,
what I'm
why do
saying
we
is
still
that
have
like
producing
how do you
companies? Why do we still have manufacturing companies in America?
a
Shouldn't
lot
we have
of
literally
companies
zero companies in America
no,
that
we
produce
wouldn't have
anything by that
literally
logic?
zero. We wouldn't have literally
Why
zero,
not?
but we had a lot because I mean, in certain small cases, it is more profitable to operate in the United States, especially when you're operating with a thing that requires a lot of education, because places like China don't have
Right.
that. But most of our
It's a
jobs
little
that
bit more
most of our
complex, is what I'm
jobs that
saying.
Okay,
are
okay.
yeah, but most of our old manufacturing jobs left. I mean, I don't see how I mean, you don't see things. You brought up like Norway or whatever. Like, when was the last time you saw like a product that said "Made in Norway" on it? I mean, do you ever
IKEA,
see that? IKEA is made in Sweden, not Norway.
whatever. What's the car company? Look, Petrus, are you against American companies outsourcing and moving manufacturing overseas?
Generally, yeah, that's the goal of tariffs.
Okay. Well, okay, because that's the thing. That can be made illegal by means other than tariffs. Tariffs are used usually to try and leverage against other countries that are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States government or the government of states. Okay.
So,
All
what
it
do you
would
want to do?
take
Ban like foreign goods? I mean, I don't
if
know. What do
you
you want
want
to do?
if you want to put an end, because you're the one who brought up this thing, if you want to put an end to sending jobs overseas, sending manufacturing overseas and outsourcing, that can be done with legislation.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, that's what
I
I
wouldn't
want.
even want to do that. Well, hold on. Trying to get rid of like free trade between countries would be detrimental to both economies, all the economies involved. Free trade is objectively good. When done right, is objectively good for both countries. In the case of just China, um, we get more goods, like we get more resources as a country, because of free trade with China.
Well,
Now
there's
those
free
resources.
trade and then there's moving your own operations. So I
So,
mean,
what
it's a
exactly are you
zero-sum
proposing?
game for jobs. I'm not
Well,
proposing, but I'm saying like when it comes to a manufacturing job that can be moved overseas or some other service job that can be outsourced, it is a zero-sum game with American employees versus foreign employees. Okay, so if we want to, like, if you really do want to stem that or stop it, then that can be done with legislation. But as
well,
far as like what you're trying to say is you're trying to
it's
say
not
that
zero
more
sum.
stuff will go overseas if we raise minimum wage.
So, what exactly are you trying to say about banning using legislation? Because I mean, yeah, that's kind of what tariffs are. But I mean, what are you exactly like talking about when you say that?
Tariffs, like it seems ridiculous to me to try and punish an American company with a tariff. Like you don't even have to do that.
Well, it wouldn't be punishing American companies. It wouldn't even be really a punishment. What it would be is that you're taxing foreign goods so that companies that hire American and produce things in America and provide jobs to American workers are able to compete with foreign countries because
So what are
foreign
you even
countries are out
talking about
competing.
then? Are you
I'm
talking about a
talking about
Chinese
tariffs.
company that manufactures in China or are you talking about
I mean,
American
just like
company that
generally
manufactures in
foreign.
China?
I'm talking about American. I'm no. I'm putting. It would be putting a tariff on goods that are produced overseas, right? And
Uh,
so what you would do is that you would have a. It would be the difference between a American company that exists in America and produced, American goods for Americans, or not necessarily for Americans, but hires Americans, versus a company that doesn't.
So an
So if
American
you have a
company?
yeah, an American company that exists in America, right, and
So
hires
you
American
want to
workers would
jack
not be
the
affected by
prices
tariffs.
up on their stuff. Okay, that's punishing an
No, no, no.
American
I want
company.
to. No, 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 no. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that would be the business that is protected, right? The business that's not what tariffs are. Tariffs are where you put a tax on foreign goods coming into the United States. That
Yes.
tax would not affect American
If it's
companies that hire
manufactured by an
American.
American company. Yeah, okay. But so hang on. So you're talking about if I understand you, you're talking about what if an American company manufactures its stuff in China and then imports it to the U.S.
I mean, just
You
any
wanna put a
company
tariff on
that
Well,
I
no,
would
maybe
want to put a tariff on
you've
that.
got to
Yeah.
be talking about American companies because there's no controlling wages for people
Okay. Well,
outside
I
the
don't
U.S.
care if they're. I mean, most of these companies are not necessarily owned by like Americans and or foreigners exclusively because of the way that stocks work. But I would say that generally the line is between a company that produces all of its stuff in America and a company that does not. A good that is produced overseas would be taxed regardless of the company, right? And a good that is
Companies are
produced in the United States would not
citizens.
be.
A corporation is like if it's either an American company or it's not, regardless of who buys the stock. It is a citizen of a state.
A citizen of a state.
Every
What do you?
corporation has to be a
Uh,
citizen of a state.
through legislation, they made I don't remember the year, but they made businesses into people. That way, individuals can sue them
Citizens
for
United.
mismarketing or thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
That's a whole
whatever.
separate thing.
That's like that's like a semantics argument. I mean, that doesn't matter.
No,
What
because
I'm
you're
saying
just
is
moving
that
goalposts. Every time we
Wait.
talk about American
So
companies, you talk about a foreign company.
I'm not saying that's not what I'm not moving goalposts. You're just not understanding what I'm
All
saying
right,
to
wait,
I
you.
all
I've
think
been
right.
you're
saying the
not
same thing this
I,
understanding.
entire
so
time.
all right, I want to move on to someone who hasn't like talked a lot recently. Is there anyone that wants to add on that hasn't talked in a bit?
Yeah, I just have a few questions because it's kind of got a little hectic, so I kind of have a few questions. So, my thoughts on tariffs is that they're incredibly or economically inefficient because that's higher taxes on the consumer, and not only is that higher taxes on the consumer, but then um yeah, I mean it's just wasteful from the ground up. Now you could make an argument.
Could you rephrase that? I'm kind of confused by what you're saying.
Yeah, I phrased that kind of terribly. I'm sorry. So, tariffs, all right, which is essentially a tax. Who pays for tariffs? American taxpayers. So basically, our
American taxpayers pay for taxes,
Pay
or
for
sorry,
tariffs
tariffs.
because it's built
yeah,
into
they
the
pay for
cost of the goods.
tariffs because
I think
tariff
that you're
is
not
tax.
understanding what a tariff is. A tariff is where you tax foreign goods entering the United States. American
So who
taxpayers
pays
are
for
not
tariffs?
paying that. Who's paying the people
no,
who pay for the tariffs are the companies that import goods to the United States.
I mean, you're just
And
wrong.
then who do they wait? Who do they
I'm
pass that price on to? Who do they pass that extra cost on to?
The companies that are producing and
No.
importing goods to the United States.
Companies. Wait. So if I were to say let's raise corporate taxes, what would your argument be against that?
Um,
That that it's going to raise prices, right?
I don't know. I mean, that's not. I mean, I don't know. I don't have like a super
It's called
fleshed out
it's
position
called
on
an
that.
analogy, and yes, it is relevant. If you tax any corporation, they're going to pass that cost on to the consumer. That includes tariffs, because we're not going to stop importing things because there are tariffs unless we make those tariffs
No,
so
yeah, I
astronomically
understand.
high.
That's
Yeah,
kind of the point of tariffs is that the goods that are produced overseas become more expensive, so that
exactly.
consumers buy
So
American products.
that's what we mean when we say that it's going to pass the cost on to the consumers. It's taxing the consumers.
Yeah, no, I that's kind of the point of a tariff. We agree on that. What I'm saying is that that's a good thing because then the
It,
American consumers will buy American products instead of foreign products
but
because the
we
foreign
don't.
products will be more
But,
expensive.
What's being
but,
manufactured here? You said everything's gone.
well, he
I didn't
wants
say
things
everything's gone. Like
to come
every
back.
single thing is
Wait.
gone.
Well, even still, he wants those jobs to come back. Right. That's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, I want the jobs that are already here to expand, and I want jobs to come back, and I want
Okay.
the jobs that are here not to leave.
Okay. Let me ask you something then.
I
Under the
also have a question.
free trade agreements that we have right now, do you agree that America has more resources because of free trade? Like, you agree that we just have more stuff?
All right.
More stuff. Like, what do you mean more stuff?
Just
Like more
anything that.
products to consume? I mean, yeah, I
Yes.
guess we
Yes.
have more products to I mean, maybe. I mean, I would say that the products would be produced here anyway, but I don't I don't measure value through the amount of products that we have to consume. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is that like what the goal of tariffs are is to raise the wages of the
Yeah.
American worker.
Yeah.
And
I
so
I
what that would
understand
be
that. I
doing,
understand that. Yeah. I
okay.
understand that. I'm going down. I'm taking you down a path. Okay,
You're taking me down
let's
a Destiny argument tree.
yes, exactly. Senpai
Can you send
Destiny.
me one of those
Anyways,
actually? Can you send me one of those fucking trees that you guys have? Because I've been trying to get my hands on one of those just so I can look at them.
okay, if so, let's just assume that it's true that free trade allows America to have more consumer goods. At the end of the day, what is the goal of having higher wages?
So that people have more money to spend on things, I guess. I mean,
So people can buy more things. That's right. So if America has more things, and we want people to have more things, and we
dude,
take
they're
into
gonna have more things
consideration.
anyway.
No,
You're not
listen,
understanding
listen.
what this
No,
is.
no,
So
no.
every single
I do
time
understand.
that a
I'm about to
niche
tie it up
exists,
I'm about to tie it up in a nice little bow for you, so you can understand this. Before COVID, what was the unemployment rate?
I don't know, dude. I don't know.
It was around 3%, which means that we do not have a problem in this country for there being a lack of jobs. As a matter of fact, right now we have a problem with the labor market being a little bit small. People are having trouble
I'm a
hiring people.
little. Can we talk about
Our
the thing you
problem
just said a
isn't.
second ago? What you're doing is
Okay,
that
go ahead.
you're marching me through something, but you as if I agreed to your last point, which I didn't. So you're saying that by
What
foreign
point do you not
companies
agree with?
producing goods, I'm about to tell you. What you're saying is that we have more products to consume in the United States because because the foreign companies are producing it for us. I mean, the thing about that you're not understanding about economics is that just like in nature, whenever there is a niche, it will be filled by companies who are going to produce it. That's how capitalism works. And so there will never just be a niche unless there is some kind of like major problem, like a famine or whatever, and you can't produce a certain thing. But it's very, very rare and in exceptional circumstances that a niche will not be almost immediately filled by something. Like if we, for example, if we made it harder for foreign companies to export cars from like China, for example, and sell it to Americans, American companies would then outcompete them and fill that niche. So it's not that you're having
So why
less
not do
products.
both? Why not
What do you
raise
mean
the
not do
minimum
both?
wage? Why not do both? Why not? Let's go with your sky high tariffs so that no one buys foreign stuffs, and let's raise the wages for American workers. And now we have
I
these
mean, the thing about the
tariffs.
tariffs is that so here's the problem with so first of all, let me explain. So the tariffs would raise the wages, right? And second of all, the reason that I am proposing the tariffs is because if we raise the minimum wage, it would cause a certain problem that I haven't really articulated or I did earlier, but I didn't. Let me do it again. So like the issue with minimum wage is that whenever you have a company that is producing something, they shouldn't be forced to have a certain wage because wages are sort of like they're almost like the price of a product where it will go up and down based on the supply and the demand. And so the thing about wages is that if you raise the wages too high artificially, right, and the supply and the demand is just not there, right, and the company cannot afford to pay that wage, right, it will become very problematic. And so another issue with minimum wage is that it would harm the jobs in the United States. And so if we were to raise tariffs, the whole point would be to bring over jobs. And so what would have to happen is that
Okay, let's bring over
the
jobs
wage would
and then
have to.
crank up the wages for those jobs.
We don't
That's
need
not
to bring over
the point
jobs.
of
That's the thing.
tariffs.
We don't need to bring
Okay.
over jobs. That's what I was trying to say earlier. I'm sorry, we just don't. Unemployment was 3% before COVID.
I
Duh,
know, but I'm
yeah.
trying
So
to
we don't even need that. The
If we
problem
just
isn't that we don't
raised the
have
Wait,
enough
minimum
money.
wage without having
liberal. No,
if
wait,
we
no,
don't
liberal
have
Cluck can finish. Liberal Cluck finish.
So it was 3% before COVID. We have jobs. Our problem isn't that we don't have jobs. The problem is that jobs aren't paying enough, and restricting the amount of consumer goods that we have in America is going to cause the price of consumer goods to go up. That is supply and demand, and if we don't have high-paying jobs to supplement that, which getting rid of tariffs will not create that, then we're just going to end up with a poorer America overall.
Right,
the
Petrus can
point of
respond, but then I want to go
raising.
to Syrus.
Okay. Uh, so the point of raising the tariffs would be to bring over American jobs. So it wouldn't make sense to do both raise the minimum wage, which would harm jobs, and raise
These are
tariffs. If we raise
Schrodinger's
tariffs
jobs that go away and come back at the
uh,
same time with you.
after yeah, because the situation. So I feel like you're just not following what I'm saying. I'm saying in modern America, where we have very little tariffs, the situation is not, at least compared to other countries, the situation is not like the situation that I'm describing right now, hypothetically, if we had large tariffs. So no, that's not what I'm saying. It's not a
Right.
Schrodinger's job. You're just retarded. What I'm saying is that sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. The thing is, let's say in your world it works like you say it will. We get these manufacturing jobs back, and they turn out to be high-paying jobs. What is the fast food worker going to do? What is the hospitality workers going to do when all these prices around them go up, but their wages don't?
So what will happen is that the jobs will come back and the supply of workers will stay the same. And so companies will have to compete for workers more. And so what will happen is that if we have a surplus of jobs and a shortage of labor, that's the ideal situation for the worker because companies will have to compete for their jobs and have to raise wages and give them benefits in order to
So they
hire them.
raise wage. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Cyrus.
wait,
I'm sorry, or whoever that was.
yeah, Cyrus. We need Cyrus to go because he's been waiting for a long time
Yeah, go
at
ahead.
this
That's
point.
fine.
Honestly, I've just been enjoying this banter in the background here, not really debating. You guys have been making most of my points for me, but I feel like we've been talking about tariffs a lot, and we've been really going in circles for the past half hour, and I just wanna hear because I feel like both sides might either agree or disagree with this, but what about the concept of subsidies? Because let's say hypothetically we do want to go into more of uh Petrus's more national state, more isolationist state in this case.
That's not what isolationism is.
Okay. Well, I don't know my terminology very well. I'm sorry, but
Well, no.
It's fine, bro. Here, it's called protectionism. Isolationism is like a foreign policy thing.
all right, fine. I misspoke, and I deeply apologize. But what about subsidies? Because tariffs, I think we've already established are a type of tax. We disagree on how beneficial tariffs should be. But subsidies are essentially just government handouts. Say we want to put $100,000 back in a car manufacturing plant in Detroit, and we want to see what, and then the government is giving people new jobs. So consumer prices wouldn't go up because taxes aren't being raised. So obviously it would be more government spending, but I just want to dabble in this hypothetical a little bit.
So we can talk about that, then we have to transition
what would you
topics
do
in.
exactly? Yeah, what exactly would you do about, or how exactly would you go about giving out subsidies?
Well, a subsidy, from my understanding, is basically the government giving. It's basically a government handout. It's basically it's not a form of welfare, I would say, but like if you want to protect American jobs, you can say, okay, we'll open up this plant.
Yeah, I know that. I don't disagree that that's what subsidies are. I'm just asking you how you would go about giving them out.
How I would go without giving them out? I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of confused
can answer that
in
if
your
you want.
logic.
I'm just
Alright, go
asking.
ahead,
I'm not
Fresh.
saying that that's. I'm just asking you how you would go about giving out subsidies and who you would give them to, etc.
Fresh actually said he had an answer.
Okay, so there's a couple things I want to point to. So this idea that there's a labor shortage and that there's more jobs than people willing to work in is currently what's happening in the market today. That's why people are seeing their wages increase. And this idea, I know liberal or somebody was asking you about this. This idea that if we brought all these jobs back, that would allow for more jobs for more people, but we don't have like an issue with needing these jobs, so that would drive down the wages of the people competing for those jobs anyway. As for the subsidy part, we do subsidize a lot of large corporations, things like oil. We subsidize Walmart on food stamps because they don't pay their workers enough. So a lot of times that they are on food stamps. So what would happen is if you did something like a universal $15 minimum wage, what you would do is you'd take the subsidies from things like oil and the savings you would save from food stamps on Walmart, and you would shift it to like the mom and pop stores that don't meet like a 50-person criteria or whatever it ultimately came out to, that they could require a federal subsidy in order to pay their workers a minimum wage. So that's how you would do it to shift the subsidies. This idea of using tariffs would not work because we just saw it happen. Donald Trump attempted to do it with China, and what happened was we had to subsidize the farmers because the farmers were the ones hurt, not the Chinese.
All right. If Petrus wants to respond, he can, but make it quick, and then we're gonna move on to a different
All right,
topic.
yeah. So I'll just address the first part. I basically agree with you that the situation in America is like that right now, where we have a what is called negatively a labor shortage, but what I actually think is a good situation. A labor shortage and a surplus of jobs, which allows workers to negotiate for better wages. But I basically just think that's a good thing. I mean, why would a labor shortage necessarily be like bad for American workers? I mean, they get to negotiate better. I mean, people. I don't know if you guys know about this, but the end of feudalism, right? And if you don't know, feudalism was a period in which, all over Europe, the peasants were essentially just like serfs or slaves or whatever. After the Black Death, when so many peasants died that there was a labor shortage, feudalism almost completely ended. You know what I mean? It shifted to a more like guild-focused Renaissance system. And so I do think that a labor shortage is actually very beneficial to the American worker. And I think that the opposite of that would be extremely disastrous. And that's what we're sort of creating. Because now we have, compared to maybe 50, 100 years ago, we have, not only do we have women working, but people are retiring later. We have huge amounts of immigrants who are adding to the workforce. And we're basically, I mean, we do have a labor shortage compared to maybe like 5 years ago, but we don't have a labor shortage compared to 50 years ago.
My friend, there was never a serf guild. You're confusing the birth of manufacturing with the labor shortage or the labor shrinkage that happened after
I didn't
the
say
Black
a
Death in
serf
1500.
guild. I said after the Black Death, right, in the 1300s, there were, and various other diseases that were happening at that point. It was almost 2 centuries of just constant disease and strife and war.
Yeah, but
There were,
agrarian was different than manufacturing. Manufacturing started and it revolutionized everything, and that's eventually how we got capitalism. When a third of Europe died from the Black Death and people were working agrarian, yeah, their conditions improved like marginally. But you're talking about guilds and stuff, that's manufacturing.
yeah, when do you think manufacturing started?
Okay, I think that this is getting way too much in the weeds. If we're gonna change the topic,
Okay.
we
Yep.
should
We're gonna
probably
change.
just
Yeah, we are.
do it now.
All right. So we're gonna go for the second
Can we do
topic.
closing statements? Can we do closing statements?
Yeah. I mean, you can if you want, but make it like really quick.
Okay,
You can go first.
I'm sorry. I just didn't get to really finish my spew, so
Yeah,
I
you
did want
can go
to do this
first.
and close. Okay, so with free trade, we get more goods and services, or goods in America. Ultimately, what wages are tied to is the amount of goods that you can buy. And if we have all these extra goods in America and we have low unemployment like we did pre-COVID, there is no reason why we need to be taking out free trade in order to bring back jobs. We have the jobs. We just have low paying jobs that are paying too little. Therefore, finding a way to raise the wages of the jobs that we already have, without making moves that will cut off the amount of goods that America has as a country, is probably the best way to go at raising the wages for people. That's yeah.
Or does anyone
Also,
else want to?
if anyone in Pickle's chat wants to talk to me after this, I saw that a lot of disagreement. Feel free, hit me up on Discord. It's Liberal Cluck. I would love to talk to you.
If anyone else wants to do a
Okay.
quick closing statement, you can.
I do quick, but just really quick. Nothing. You don't hear my fan or anything, right? It's all good.
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
Okay, good. All right, so I think I got that fixed. Anyway, real quick. I think we got sidetracked really almost immediately from what the idea is about raising minimum wage and stuff. I would actually really love to have either Liberal Cluck or somebody who's arguing about not having a liberal minimum wage and something else. I would love to have that conversation because that's just a thought that never occurred to me because my background and my thought process is not really on that the removal of a minimum wage for policy. So I'd love to have that conversation. As for raising the minimum wage, this idea of labor shortage where people aren't going back to their jobs is currently happening. And what we're seeing is the jobs are begging the government to stop subsidizing people at a level that is above their pay grade. And right now, the pay grade for these massive corporations is so tiny that the minimal number of whatever your unemployment is, which varies from state to state. So it's like 50% plus 300 is more than what you would make on your full-time salary. So the obvious answer would be to raise the wage, and that's what corporations are finding out, and when they're fighting that. This idea that it's going to cut jobs, it has just not happened. It is not, the data does not purport to that, and raising the wages, even when the corporations do it, would take more people off these food stamps. If we do it well nationally, we can see something like 17 million people come out of poverty. I'm sure there's more issues. We'd have to figure out how to do it state by state, because like Michigan and Missouri don't need whatever California's cost of living is, because it's vastly different. But just an overall raise in the minimum wage will allow for a better lifespan for the American people, and will allow us to get out of this crushing death spiral that we have for the working class.
Or anyone else?
And my closing statements, I'm just going to make this real brief. But when it comes to employers looking for employees and they ask themselves, why do I not have any employees coming in? To quote the great Joe Biden, pay them more. Sorry,
Okay.
that's my bit.
Or is that it?
Nah, that was
Or
fine.
is
I like to throw a hypothetical using what I've heard. So the idea of using tariffs and Shandora's idea of Sharona's idea, my bad, uh, with legislation, we could, for an example, the U.S. doesn't have any manufacturing involving cell phones. Most of it is in China or in Indonesia, if I remember. Right now, we're seeing in the news about the Freedom Phone and how it's China made. The fact that we can't have legislation to put, what would it be, inspector generals or something of that akin, to watch their, let me rephrase that. If you put tariffs on companies like Apple and Samsung, that way when their product leaves a country that used slavery like China, they get taxed as a company, while having legislation that has, I guess, watchdogs that look at the product, review the product, and base the product off the prices that would be assembled today. And if a price goes up, then sue the company for improper raising of prices, I would suppose. But that that's it.
or is that it? All right.
I guess
We'll
so.
go. We'll be going on to the second topic, which is healthcare. We'll actually be starting with Cyrus. We'll do reverse order. So the question
Alright,
is. Okay, so the question
Okay.
is, what is your position on healthcare? Should the market play any role? And do you believe in universal healthcare? If so, is a public option or single payer preferable?
all right. So my position on healthcare is, I would, in a Cyrus utopia, I would like to see um, Medicare for all, or possibly even a nationalized healthcare system. But optically speaking, I think a public option is much more preferable, especially since I am almost, I believe in the freedom of choice, I believe in free markets, and I also believe in having the choice to choose your own healthcare.
All right. So next is Sneed.
So my position on healthcare would be that the United States has a different system than every other nation, surprisingly, because we have uh, odd tentacles attached to private industry and then government industry or federal government uh, attachments. I think that an all-paying system, all-payer system, if I remember correctly, would be the best because then everyone is paying the bill, and we would be able to put different percentages based on if it's an individual, if it's a company. Going back to the fact that companies are people, we would need to set it up in a certain way to make sure that big companies don't walk out with the bag. But I think the market should be used because it spurs innovation when it's actually used correctly. A good purpose of that was Martin Shkreli. When he became the CEO of the company that increased the price of insulin, most of Americans knew that, oh, okay, so I can look it up on Canada and see I can get this for a decreased price. I might do that now but I imagine there are certain laws that prevented that. But that's it.
All right. Petrus just said that he'll be right back, so we'll go to Fresh Faces.
Okay, I was trying, so there might be a little wind down to it. So I'm for Medicare for All. Medicare for All was the concept that really shifted me from the right to the left. There is just an overwhelming amount of data to show that shifting to a single payer national Medicare for All system under the one Bernie proposed would save us lives, save us money, would help increase the freedom of this country. And for people who always argue about the freedom to pick your provider, having Medicare for All would allow for just more freedom across the board. As for the private market's ability to do it, I think it would just be cosmetic type stuff that isn't covered by the national government. There is no reason that we, the richest country in the world, should be the only major developed country that does not allow for a single payer system or a nationalized system in which we pay more and get less healthcare. We're America, damn it. We deserve better healthcare. We deserve to have more freedom. Let's get to this. It's just mind blowing that these numbers that are thrown out are just it's the Koch brothers study, just for that example, would according to them is like 600,000 people would be dead over the 10-year span from just not switching to Medicare for All. So it is absolutely infuriating that this is still some type of question. If we have to go the public option route to get to it ultimately, that's fine, because this is America. We have to take baby steps to get to the things that are just no brainers. But that's where I believe we need to end up.
All right, and next is Econoboi.
So I would say that my preferred healthcare system is probably a single payer system with some private and public options on the hospital side, which is more or less the Canadian system that they have. I think it's important to recognize, though, that it is possible to have an efficient, well-functioning private healthcare system that's affordable, low cost, and universal in nature. You can look at the Netherlands or Switzerland, where they have totally private insurance, but they just have a well-regulated and keyword well-regulated market, and everyone's covered at a low and affordable rate, and it's totally private. And so I think it's important to not necessarily be so one-dimensional with your economic prescriptions on the healthcare side, because not every country is going to be amicable to the idea of a single payer system. Like in America, I would say that your best bet's probably a Medicare buy-in, like a public option. But the idea of eliminating all private insurance for most Americans is not very tenable. But the idea of a public option like France or Germany has is very tenable, I think, for a lot of Americans. And so, although I would say that single payer is the best system, there's a lot of really, really good systems that are multi-payer and that are totally private. So it just depends on how it's regulated. Overall, that's what I would say. I would say markets can have a place in healthcare. It just depends on the regulations surrounding them and how effective they are.
All right, and Cluck.
Anything but what we have now. Holy shit! They were gonna charge me $130 for a fucking COVID test during a pandemic. What the hell is that bullshit? I am definitely for Medicare for all. I am also for a public option, whichever one gets the job done. I believe that both can be implemented well. I believe that both can be implemented shittily. We can go over how those things are, but I seriously doubt that we're going to be able to get into that kind of nuance in this conversation. But yeah, either one is fine with me as long as they're implemented well. That's
All right, and Habeas.
Yeah, absolutely positively we need single payer universal health care. If you want to look at the things that have been the absolute worst for humanity, that have caused the most death and suffering and misery, health insurance companies would probably be in your top 5, if not your top 3. It's just like, I mean, I know the panel here is a little bit young, so maybe you haven't experienced the full horror of it yet, but our healthcare system in the US is broken, and insurance companies broke it. They're the ones that cause the costs to go sky high for everything. And together with the lack of regulation, like one person mentioned Martin Shkreli and jacking up the prices of prescriptions, and then the innovation of getting them from abroad. You know why they cost less abroad? Because those countries regulate the prices. So it's not capitalism that gets those foreign pills for you. It's actually the opposite. It's government regulation, and the American a lot of those pharmaceutical companies are American, or at least can buy enough American politicians that they evade those regulations. But we absolutely positively need the same kind of regulations on prescriptions so that you don't have to break the law and import from another country to get your treatment. The insurance companies have no place in healthcare. Their goal is to get more money out of you than you cost to maintain your health. And yeah, it's supposed to be like, in theory, it's going to be like person A doesn't get sick very much and person B gets sick a lot and it comes out in the wash. But that's not how it works. They just make it miserable for everyone. They deny claims. Have you ever, like, I know that there are going to be, I don't know how many people are here, but there's going to, you talk to more than like 5 people, you're going to find someone who's had to go back and forth with an insurance company over a billing error or a denied treatment, or something like that. And because all they do all day long, and I have worked for 2 insurance companies, and I know this, uh, all they do all day long is just find ways to not pay bills and to deny care. And this is like, there are some things that you can make a case for capitalism being a benefit to. Doctoring is not one of them. Doctoring, there should not be a corporatization of doctoring. There should not be anything like that. It should be you pay doctors for what the care is worth. And because we live in a society, it is unacceptable and immoral to make healthcare inaccessible or cost prohibitive. And the way to do that is just to abolish insurance companies, health insurance companies, from the face of the earth, and do a single payer system where the government just covers everybody and no one has to worry about going bankrupt. No one has to worry about like getting this or that denied for profit motives, because it just should not be a for-profit business to try and minimize the costs of keeping people healthy and fighting disease. It just leads to absolute horrifying results. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks. Petrus, are you back?
I do not believe he's back yet.
All right. So, yeah, I don't think he's back yet. We'll wait until he gets back. No, actually, we'll just go into open forum
Okay,
now.
wait,
When he gets
wait. I can
back, I'll
bully
let
your
him
chat while
talk.
we wait.
No,
I can
no,
bully
you
your
don't.
chat while we wait. Come on now. Why
I
aren't
think.
any of them on here? We got one conservative. Why aren't any of these people that are talking shit in your chat
Oh,
on here?
they're a lot of them I think are fans of Petrus. Obviously, a lot of them are
Oh.
siding with him, but I mean that happens with any creator. But yeah, we'll go to open forum now. Once Petrus comes back, I'll let him, speak his mind, and then we can go back to open forum again. We'll go into open forum now.
All right. I would like to start, and I would just like to say, I would agree. Optically, in 2012, 2010, I think a single payer healthcare system would work. But ever since 2016, I feel like you can't force anybody on any government-run program anymore at this given time, and I feel like there would be there would be a lot of fallback to that, which is why I am in favor for the public option, because it gives people more choice. Yes, there's a government-run program for those people who need it, but if you want to stay on your private health insurance, I don't know any reason you would, but let's just say you do, you can. We're just giving people the option, and I just don't see the point of, especially in this day and age, trying to force everybody to do one thing. If people don't want healthcare, I mean, you can strongly disagree with them, but you can't force anybody to do anything.
Liberty, I love
Alright.
it.
All right.
And
So if
force
anyone
people
wants
to
to
pay
respond,
taxes.
wait, if anyone wants to respond to him, they can. But after Petrus talk, just let him have like an opening statement first. He says he's back. If you need me to read the question again too, I will, Petrus.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So the question is, what is your position on healthcare? Should the market play any role? And do you believe in universal healthcare? If so, is a public option or single payer preferable?
So basically, I don't have a super strong position, so I might change this throughout the debate. But basically, my position is that, first of all, the government is not very good at running programs. They're very inefficient and they take a long time to do things, as we can see with, for example, the NHS in England. And so, what I would basically propose is that I do believe that healthcare is a right, but I think that basically the government should pay for people to buy healthcare services from corporations instead of the government itself having any kind of agency that provides healthcare.
All right,
So
cool.
Well,
what
that's more or
does
less what the. Okay, sorry. Go on.
No, you can go,
what
Conway.
I was
what
gonna
do,
say that.
yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
that's more or less what the Canadian system is, right? I mean, the Medicare system in Canada is just the insurance, right? So I mean, it's just providing people the insurance scheme, and it's not actually. Don't get me wrong. There's public hospitals in Canada, but it's not like, the NHS is distinct from like the Canadian single payer system, in that the NHS is, if you're a doctor in England, you're pretty much working for the state, whereas in Canada, it just depends on the hospital you work at and the practice you work at. It's mostly just the insurance side. So, when someone says Medicare for all, they're usually talking about, at least what Bernie's talking about, is the idea that just the insurance, just the people paying the hospital bill are going to be the state, not necessarily, every employee that works in healthcare is going to be like a government employee anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. The issue with the NHS, I would say, is, I do think that the government should try to assist people and pay most over like the entirety of healthcare, most basic healthcare. Um, Maybe not like if you want like a nose job or whatever, but the kinds of stuff that people really need. But I really just don't think that any government agency could efficiently handle something as important as healthcare without it being very slow moving and inefficient like it is in England.
I
So
mean, I
most
guess
people,
I disagree, but like the English, what I was going to say was the British sort of NHS is, I mean, I would argue a bit more efficient than the American system. I mean, I think a lot of people have a weird romanticization of the American system, when the reality is, you're waiting similar times for care. It costs 50% more. I'm just not sure you're getting what you're paying for. I think another thing worth pointing out is that, of all the single payer, multi-payer, universal healthcare systems in the world, um, there's a lot of them that I'm not sure we would necessarily be scared to go to a hospital in those countries, right? I mean, I'm not sure if we, if I had a broken arm, I wouldn't be scared to go to an English or a Welsh or a Scottish hospital, because they've got a pretty quality healthcare system there that gives care to patients when they need it. So I mean, even the waiting list idea is kind of it's a pretty overblown thing. When
I mean,
talking
yeah,
about
that
the
makes
single
sense.
payer system
I'm
in
not
general.
like saying that the American system is like the ideal or anything. Uh, I mean, what you describe the Canadian system as sounds pretty nice, honestly. I mean, the thing about the
True.
NHS is that the issue with government, when the government runs something like that, they have no incentive to make any kind of profit at all, and so they're somewhat slow and inefficient, as I said. And so I'm not sure how you would do this, but I don't think that the government just having a single agency that runs it all is the best idea because of that.
I want to allow Cluck to talk.
yeah, I mean, most people in England will fight to the death for their healthcare system. It's one of the things that the conservatives in England has been trying to get rid of or trying to privatize forever, and they just can't because it's so unpopular. Even amongst like people who would vote for the Conservative Party in England. And I don't understand why you think that America can't, like, governments can't run efficient healthcare systems when most other governments do have a much heavier hand in their healthcare system in one way or another. And they do better than us on most metrics.
Well, it's because we allow our government to abuse us as citizens through the healthcare industry. We allow them to increase prices. We allow things like, if I remember correctly, Operation Northwoods, where they lied to over 200 black men about receiving syphilis treatments and watch them die and study them because they wanted to do that. If it wasn't for the corruption in the government, we could implement plenty of useful utilities, plenty of useful healthcare in different regions that specify in different things based off of that
So
area.
what you're saying is that like American government is just bad compared to other governments.
It's bad in the regard that the citizens don't hold the government accountable. So when we compare other nations' healthcare, like as Eco just said, the idea that there's waiting lists, while there could be because we don't have the exact statistics unless someone here is a medical professional in that region that knows, we fall subject to, oh, I'm trying to think the word. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think. We fall victim to the idea of like the Martin Scarellis that will pop up in the industry, know about the industry, take abuse of the industry, and what is he in for prison? 10 years, and
For
that's the
something
only
entirely different.
true. But because we chose as the population not to say this man just increased prices, why are we not going at every executive that can do this type of procedure, look at how much the prices are doing now, and those that have it increased, give them a time to reduce it, or they face lawsuits, penalties of some sort?
Well, it's because we just don't have the law. Like the government isn't involved in the healthcare industry in that way. Like we need more government involvement in order to get that kind of result, right?
Look, I won't deny that our government
But we
needs
also
fixing.
need.
We have too much anti-democratic bullshit for our government to work well. We have gerrymandering and voter suppression, which means that the minority, a
Wait,
very powerful minority, runs everything, and the vast majority of the people never get what they want. But anytime anyone gives the thought-terminating cliche of "oh, you can't trust this to the government because the government screws things up," then why is the government run our military? No one has
so
ever.
Because
Uh,
it's not
for
possible. It's not possible to have a military that isn't run by the government.
wait,
Right,
for
yeah,
the sake
Cluck, then
of this
Fresh Faces.
for the sake of this conversation, I think that we should assume that our government isn't some kind of special kind of stupid that the rest of the world's governments like we don't have some kind of some
We
kind of
don't have the
condition that the
U.S.
rest of the world doesn't have because like let's just talk about government healthcare as a concept and not specifically applied to the American government itself because then we're just going to get into whether or not our government is particularly good or particularly that governments are our government is particularly stupid and we can't really do things but that doesn't really take away from the merits of a Medicare for all or a public option and
Okay,
as a
Fresh Faces.
concept.
Okay, just quickly, I think one thing that we didn't mention when we were listing off the when you were listing off the things that the government is causing to not have this, you forgot bribery.
Oh,
The
that too. Yeah,
the
I apologize.
Joe Manchin's daughter is one of those CEOs who just jacked up the prices of medicines. So this it's not that the government is stupid. It's that there is it's captured by corporations, and that there is some segment of our government that will see that vindictively driving things into the ground to prove that government doesn't work by breaking the function of government will allow them to argue that government doesn't work. So there's a difference there. It's not that the government is stupid. There's people who realize that they can play to this idea that government doesn't work by forcing government not to work. So I think ultimately the public option would be the best way to get into some kind of single payer option. I do know that there is the argument that a public option would basically create its own little like death spiral. And I've seen people argue this. I haven't looked into this, and I don't know if anyone's looked into it enough to create an argument where that basically this is my understanding of the argument. It's totally possible that I'm wrong because I haven't really looked enough into public options itself. Is that you could use a public option basically to siphon off all the healthy people, and that all the older elderly would be stuck on the government's coverage of healthcare, and that would prove that it's too costly. Now, whether that is a fact or not, I don't know, but I do think we have to realize that there's two main points that would ultimately contend with this, and one would be the corporate capture of our government, and that there is a large subsection of both the populace and the government, one of the two parties, that is totally okay with burning things to the ground in order to prove that government does not work.
So this idea that under a public option, all of the sick people, or most of the sick people, will end up on the government dole, which will cause it to skyrocket in price, is probably somewhat true. It just it logically follows. I don't really see a problem with that though, as long as the government makes sure that the people that are on the public option is getting adequate care and is not getting left behind. If we end up with a two-tier, this is what I mean by you can implement a public option and it can be good or it can be bad. It just depends on how it's implemented. If we end up with a two-tier system to where the people who are on private insurance is just getting massive preferential treatment at the cost of adequate treatment for the people who are on the public option, that's just going to end up being a system that's, pretty much what we have now, where the wealthy is getting, this great service and the poor people or the sick aren't really getting that much service if they can't afford it. But if you implement it to where the people who are on public option are going to get the services that they need, while the people on private insurance is also getting the service they need, maybe with a little bit extra. I don't really know why they would want to go to private over public, but if we did that, it would be a better system than we have now. And I also think that it's important that if we allow people to go onto private private health insurance, they're not go. I don't think that they should be exempt from paying taxes into the public option. If you're going into private insurance, you still have to pay for the public option. Otherwise, it will go bankrupt.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, I think
By the way,
it's
if
not
anyone
it's
ends
not
up
too
getting
difficult to
banned, they
achieve
can
what
fill
you're
out an
talking
unban
about. It's more or
request.
less just that, if you're a medical provider, you'd have to accept the public option, which isn't. I don't believe that's the case with Medicaid, but I think with Medicare, you can't deny someone with Medicare you can't deny someone with Medicare services, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong on that though. But yeah, it wouldn't be hard to do what you're describing. If anything, there'd be a lot of downward pressure on prices because if people have an affordable option to go into, then that effectively becomes the ceiling on care for whatever the public option covers, right? So if you're offering the same exact services for a public option where, we're going to charge $300 a month, but the public
All
option's
right, I
only
think I got this
200, well,
conversation back on track, and I'm surprised everyone agrees on this. So this is interesting.
I think
uh,
I think you forgot to mute.
my God, the unprofessionalism. No,
My
honestly,
bad.
it seems like we all do have pretty much agreement. I was gonna suggest if you guys wanted to move on to the next topic, we could, because it seems like there's not much clash with this topic.
Does anyone else have anything else to say?
I'm good. I love welfare.
All right.
Love welfare.
Yeah, we'll move on to the third and final topic. Um, and we'll go back to the normal rotation, and we'll start with Javius this time. So, topic 3: does welfare disincentivize work? Are welfare queens a real problem? And do you support something such as a universal basic income?
Um, I don't think welfare disincentivizes work in the way that is mythologized. The welfare queen is a myth. It was bred by Reagan and his people, and it's bullshit. I I'm actually kind of fine with disincentivizing work a little bit because I object to being a cog in a fucking capitalist machine. But um, I think that people are, for the most part, motivated to do things, and especially if I mean, I would never suggest that people should be able to just get the same payments and goods and services provided to them for doing nothing as opposed to having a job. I am for universal basic income, but not as a replacement for welfare or social programs. That is apparently when people, because from what I've learned, UBI was actually started by the concept, at least, was first seriously considered by President Nixon, basically as a replacement for all the social programs. They're just like, well, let's just cut it all out and just give people a check every month or something. I don't like that. I think that we need to keep social programs, um, and I'm quite happy to have taxes go to provide just basic, comfortable housing for everyone, whether they have a job or not. And yeah, tax the rich, I'm fine with that. Tax the corporations, I'm fine with that. Take it out of the military budget, I'm fine with that. Um, but everyone, I think regardless of whether you have a job or not, you should at least get a little basic apartment, and a reasonable amount of food and whatever else people need to live just comfortably. I am totally fine with that. And if you want a nicer house or whatever, there's probably work opportunities, hopefully. But it really shouldn't. And I think that would probably solve our minimum wage problem too. Because people, because right now we're extorted to work for abusive employers. I've worked for many in my day just to get health care or just to get, crappy little apartment, just to get all this stuff. You take away their power by making them not hold our life and death over us. And suddenly you have actual bargaining power. So, yes, I support that.
All right, and then Cluck.
Welfare queen is a myth. A lot of people on welfare programs have jobs. They're just low-paying jobs, or the people that are in these jobs are in a job that's not able to adequately assess their particular needs. So, for example, a single mother of 4 children probably is not going to get by on a Walmart wage, whereas a single person with no children probably could. So something like that. What welfare can do that the labor market cannot do, really well is make up the resources that people need when they are in very niche situations, like the one I just explained. So I am a supporter of welfare. I think that certain types of welfare can probably disincentivize work. If I was getting paid the extended unemployment rate, you better bet your sweet ass I wouldn't be working part time in a prison right now. But yeah, most welfare programs that we have today just aren't set up that way. Universal basic income, I like the idea. I would love to see more studies around.
Oh,
My God, we've lost
oh
him.
no. Rest in
Yeah, you
Found
got
it,
peace.
him.
but unfortunately,
Oh,
there's
If he's on the East Coast, he could be going through a storm like I am right now, but I'm not losing connection.
yeah. There was a thundering outside earlier. All right, who
What do
DDoSed
you want to
them?
do, Pickle
okay.
Lime? Take
Yeah, I'm
charge,
sorry.
Pickle Lime.
All right, you froze, so you're good
I
now.
know. Everything went to hell. Yeah. So I think that America's in a very good position to be like a guinea pig for UBI because we have a lot of things that are going to be automated, and we are a very wealthy country, and we could probably foot that bill. However, I do not think that we should print money in order to do UBI. UBI should be a redistribution program and not a inflationary one. And that's what I got.
All right, and then
Cool.
Econoboi.
Sure. So I think the first question: does welfare disincentivize work? The best evidence that's available doesn't really seem to indicate that welfare incentivizes work or disincentivizes work, and that's for a fairly logical reason. Is that it's not really a comfortable life living on welfare. If you've ever grown up, if you yourself have grown up in poverty, if you've grown up poverty adjacent, you've known people who have utilized the welfare system at one time or another. You know it's not a particularly comfortable living. I know that a lot of people are talking about the unemployment insurance system now. That oh, you can get paid 38 grand a year on unemployment. That is true in some states, but interestingly, in the states that have canceled unemployment insurance and states that haven't, there hasn't really been a noticeable, significant, difference in job growth in the states that have canceled it versus haven't. And that could be for a lot of reasons. It's just to say that it doesn't really seem the case that when you offer a modest welfare system, as the U.S. has, that it disincentivizes work to a significant degree. Do you support something like a UBI? It's getting harder and harder not to be in favor of a UBI. It seems like every experiment that's done with UBI, every time it's trialed somewhere, it has very positive and very good effects overall. It's more of a funding question. Where does the money for a UBI actually end up coming from? Which is probably the more interesting question, and that could change, how I would feel about a UBI broadly. Um, but in general, welfare seems to work. It seems to be a good thing that we have welfare. It doesn't seem to disincentivize work. And it seems like a lot of the opposition to welfare is in the face of most empirics and most studies regarding the subject, that welfare does reduce poverty to a certain extent and reduce income inequality and increase mobility overall.
All right.
Econoboi, you're so fucking eloquent. I'm simping so hard for you right now.
I love you too.
All right. Fresh faces.
Look, the Econoboi said, he covered pretty much everything I wanted to say. It doesn't appear that the data shows that people are not going to be incentivized to work because they're getting welfare. And also this idea, the idea that people aren't incentivized to work goes against this idea that they also push that Americans want to get back to work. And it's true, like Americans don't want to just sit there and do nothing. As for welfare queens, I think it's been pretty obviously stated. I think there's like direct quotes from Reagan saying that they did things like the welfare queens to hurt to black people and things like that. As for having a UBI, I'm for UBI. I posted in the chat these what was it, Stockholm? I always forget which city it is. Stockholm. Stockton in California did a trial run with $500. And it showed that the people who got this money, it just increased their quality of life. And also this idea that welfare work. The best part of America is dealing with the actual COVID pandemic. The why we where our robustness for what we gave the Americans was the unemployment benefits. While on a stimulus check basis, we gave less than other countries. The 600 and 300 plus bonus that we gave to unemployment was such a massive boon and basically the only thing that kept us afloat. So this idea that that UBI won't work is just, it doesn't appear to be factual. This I do agree that we should not have it as a replacement for the current welfare system. It should be an expansion on it. How it's paid for, I imagine that would be simply through actually taxing the wealthy or taxing corporations, or maybe it would ultimately pay for itself depending on what level of UBI was offered to people and what the ultimate economic impact of that was. So um, that's all I really have to say to that.
All right, and then Petrus.
I don't know if people cut out.
Oh yeah, so I I support some welfare programs, but one of the issues is that if you have a situation where a lot of people who don't sorry who aren't very well educated, it makes more sense financially for them to stay on unemployment benefits than it does to get a job. If you were on if you were on unemployment benefits and it was more than you would get paid at a job, would you really go out and get a job? And so I don't think that should be the situation. I think that people should be incentivized to get a job. Maybe UBI is the answer to that, so that people, they don't starve to death or whatever, but they still have the encouragement to go out and get a job. I honestly, I haven't, thought a ton on this topic, but I mean, I think that the issue of the welfare queen thing, it is it is sensationalized, but there are many people out there who are just on welfare and they don't have a job, they're abusing the system, and you have these people who are permanently on welfare. The reason for welfare is really just to help people get back on their feet. I wouldn't support a welfare system where people are just permanently dependent on the government, don't have a job. And so I think that the goal of redesigning welfare should basically be to prevent that from happening and make systems that allow people to get back on their feet but not support them for their entire lives. The thing about UBI is that it would be nice if UBI wouldn't cause inflation, but the issue with the government is that the government has been running a negative budget for a very long time. They just print all of the money that they need, and they will make up whatever kind of budget they want, right? And then they will let the Fed, the printing agencies, print the money to make up the difference so they can pay for everything. And so if we add massive new social programs that are essentially just printing money, that's what the government's going to do. And it would be nice if we could make them not do that. But realistically, I think that's what UBI would end up becoming. And so I think the only real way to get a UBI that isn't like that is to do it on the state level, because the federal government will just print money to make up the difference, which will just take money out of people's pockets. It's almost like a hidden tax because inflation, it lowers the amount of value that money has.
All right, and then next is Sneed.
So I think we need welfare reform, and we need to examine what went wrong in the 1996 bill that was, what was it, signed by Bill Clinton and the Republican Senate. Uh, uh, I've met one welfare queen. Surprisingly, she has a lot of tenacity. I'll give her that, and I do respect her for how she games the system. And was there a third question?
UBI.
It was what
Oh,
UBI, yeah.
UBI. Um, we should use UBI in a way in which we can uplift the younger generation now, while also ensuring that the older generation is not going to be paying for it through Social Security or other assets that can be affected by them.
All right, and finally Syrus.
All right. So to answer your three questions, I'm kind of fairly new to politics, so I don't know much about um drama queens or not drama queens, sorry, welfare queens and what they are. I'm assuming they're just people who live off welfare, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I don't have enough information to form my own opinion on that, but when it comes to welfare, I feel like I'd say yes, welfare disincentivizes people to work, but that's only because the working conditions that they're forced to live in is not good. But that's going to lead us down to a rabbit hole that isn't about welfare in general, so I'll just leave it at that. And then when it comes to UBI, I'm going to be the odd man out here, and I'm going to disagree with UBI, and I'm going to propose more of a global minimum income or GMI because based on my research, GMI helps more people who need it when UBI is just more of a fear tactic for automation, in my opinion.
All right, and now
Can
we
you
can go
clarify what
to
you mean
open
by
forum.
GMI?
Okay, so GMI is global minimum income. So basically, what it is I have an article here, but basically it's it's basically an income for people who need it. It's basically a form of. There's a good definition. I'm sorry, I gotta find this.
Is this a thing that's actually global, or they just like call it global the same way we call the baseball shit World Series?
Here, I'll give you the Mashable article I have here. I know Mashable isn't the most reliable, but basically, it's trash transfer. It's a cash transfer experiment. Um, just like UBI, but instead it's literally only if you have the income below this then you qualify, and otherwise you don't. But once you reach the threshold by making one more dollar, your whole $1,000 benefit is being shot. So there's obviously pros and cons. So let's just say if you make $20,000 or $200,000 or less, let's just say hypothetically, let's just throw numbers around, and then you would qualify for GMI. But if you make $200,001, then you wouldn't qualify. But I feel like that's more, again, economically efficient than UBI, who's like, all right, let's just give $1,000 to every single person on in America.
Just to clarify,
So
so
you want UB?
is GMI basically similar to UBI, but it's not universal, as in only
Means
people in
tested.
lower quintiles of wealth are actually eligible?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if you were to do a negative tax credit for people of low wages. It's pretty much the same thing.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
I mean, I would agree with that. That would be a form of welfare. That would be a thing that I would definitely agree to. I don't really see any benefit to having something like UBI be universal, like Bill Gates getting $1,000 a month. It just doesn't seem like it's a thing that would be needed in order to make UBI successful. But I will say that means tested programs do allow people to fall through the cracks. It makes things more complicated for you to apply, and it makes things more confusing. And sometimes the parameters that are set just aren't taking into account people's unique situations. Therefore, some people who probably should qualify don't qualify. So it just depends on how it would be means tested. Would determine whether I would agree to it or not.
Yeah, it's also there's a good argument for a UBI if you're distrustful of government operations in general. There's a good libertarian conservative argument for a UBI, which is that, well, it's so damn simple to run that even the government couldn't fuck it up, right? If every single person above the age of 18 gets the $1,000 a month, well, you know, I mean, that's as simple as just, Joey B or Donnie T, whoever the president is, just injecting that cash into the bank accounts of everyone. And obviously, there's some issues with like unbanked people, but that's an issue with literally any government program. But the idea, the reason I'm maybe more partial to UBI versus a GMI or a negative income tax, which a negative income tax and a GMI seem indistinguishable from each other, is that the complexity of it seems to degrade the program. It probably reduces its popularity to a certain extent, makes it more complex to run, and arguably you get kind of the same effect anyway because the wealthier people are taxed more to pay into the system anyway. So I mean, there's still a net loss into the system for UBI in the first place because we do have a progressive taxation system. So, you know, to me, a UBI seems to make a bit more sense than a
I
than a
think that
normal
actually
means tested program.
does make a lot of sense. The UBI argument you just made about how the government is probably not going to be able to fuck it up because of how simple it is. Maybe a UBI system could replace other forms of welfare because it would be easier for the government to run.
Yeah, arguably. I know a lot of people are not amicable to that argument, the idea of, getting rid of welfare and exchanging it for a UBI system, but really one of the most effective ways that the US has ever one of the most effective ways that the US has fought poverty in the past and to the present has been Social Security, which is it's a universal income program that everyone gets. You actually get more out of Social Security if you're wealthier, which is something people can argue against, but it is universal. Everyone gets it when they retire, assuming that they've worked. And because it's not cyclical and it's not based on how much money you've had, to the extent that you can get, less if you've paid in less, you just get more if you've paid in more. And it's not contingent on having a job or lack thereof. It's been very, very effective at reducing elderly poverty compared to the rest of the population. So, it seems like a UBI where everyone gets 500, even if it's just $500 a month, $1,000 a month. It would be really, really effective at fighting poverty, basically, because everyone gets it, circulates perfectly, and it's just cash, obviously, and it's also kind of good. It's a good free market. Last thing I'll say, I'm going on a little bit longer here. So, It's kind of a good free market exercise because it allows people to sort dollars themselves. People can spend the money on what they want rather than the government saying, you have to spend this money on food or housing or whatever. It kind of allows dollars to go where the market wants them to go instead of, classically the welfare programs like food stamps, which are good things. It's just that it is a bit more of a free market friendly solution to the issue of poverty, a UBI versus other forms of welfare.
Yeah, that's very true. But I have one question, right? And I'm not saying this from like a bad faith, like countering the UBI perspective. But how do we prevent people from? Because I do think it might actually be a pretty good idea. But how do we prevent people from just living off UBI and not getting a job?
I
You
mean,
know,
Don't.
if anyone else wants to go, they can. Yeah, I think,
Well,
the truth is a UBI, if you're making, I mean, I don't know who's living on $12,000 a year very comfortably. And if they are, I mean, I guess that's their choice. But, that would be my response is that I'm not sure anybody can really comfortably live on 12 grand a year. But if they
I will
can, I mean,
figure it out.
yeah, more power
I
to them if they can. I don't have a problem with it.
guess that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think it is really enough to live off of. That makes a lot of sense actually. I think you're kind of UBI pilled me today. Well, I think I remember I was listening to Andrew Yang talking about this like a year or two ago, and one of the things that he said that really resonated with me was we have to lean into, and this is a paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what he said, but what he said was we have to lean into one of the core uh, compat, what's the word that he used?
Components.
What components of what the government capacities? Yeah, one of the core capacities of what the government is competent at, which is sending large amounts of checks to large amounts of people, and then you get to do whatever you want with the money, and the government doesn't have control over you. And so I think that it is almost like the perfect government program because it could replace other government programs that do similar things, and the government could actually do it well. So I think it is probably a good idea. You could probably institute UBI and get rid of other similar welfare programs like I don't know, like food stamps or whatever, and people would just be able to send that money on or spend that money on whatever they want. You know, like food or whatever. I mean, $12,000 a year if you have like a job or whatever. Like a lot of these really poor people who are living in poverty could probably get out of that situation with that, and it's not really enough to live off of on your own. So they wouldn't be be welfare queens or whatever because they wouldn't
I
be
think
able
it
to.
should be enough to live off of.
yeah, it's
The
dependent on the
UBI should be enough
situation.
to live off of.
Yeah.
Well, I actually don't
Yeah,
like this
it's.
idea. I actually don't like
Mhm.
this idea of getting rid of welfare, eh, in replacing it with UBI. That seems a little Well, one of the good
Yep.
things about welfare is that you can target specific groups of people that have specific needs, such as like single mothers with multiple children, and give them a little bit more extra resources compared to somebody who's like me, who is does not have any kids, or isn't married, doesn't have any type of responsibilities to anyone but themselves. So me and the single
Yep.
mother would still be getting UBI, but the single mother will still need to help with food and housing and things like that
Mhm.
because she's just got more responsibilities.
You're forgetting that the government's like retarded and it doesn't know how to do that.
Well, yeah, but
Well, yeah.
that's an issue
I
with
think that
like.
my argument would be to that would be to say that if I would agree that a UBI you should probably get more UBI if you have children. That's a pretty logical thing. If you're a household of two, you're getting 2 grand a month worth of UBI, and say you get an extra 400 a month for each kid you have, or something like that. That would
That
be
makes sense.
reasonable.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm a bit more skeptical on the idea that uh, you do have to tie things to like necessary goods because you don't trust people to buy what they need, and it doesn't seem well bore out in any study that I've seen that when you give cash relief to people, they really don't tend to spend it on bullshit, and so if and I'm not even necessarily advocating for this, but the experiments need to be done where if you did take away someone's food stamps and you took away someone's housing subsidy and you just gave them $1,500 a month, what do they do with that $1,500? And it seems like in the studies that I've seen, they really do just spend it on the things they need, and they don't tend to spend it, like I said, on a bunch of bullshit. Kids
The
going
other
going
thing
hungry.
about like food stamps or whatever is that the people I don't know. I don't have a statistic for this, but I've seen this and heard this stuff happening before, where these people who are living in these like impoverished neighborhoods or whatever, they're using the food stamps and selling them for cash. You know what I mean? And then people go out and use the food stamp. So, and there's always a way around it. You know, what I mean? People will figure out a way to get to the point where they can spend their money on bullshit. So we might as well just give them the ability to spend their money on whatever they want, because
Yeah.
there's
So
no way to really control their behavior.
So yeah, so to clarify, I was under the impression y'all meant give everyone, $1,200, or $1,000 a month or whatever, and then cut all welfare. You're not like giving people who need more. I can see it working out to where you can as long as you're taking into consideration some people need more than others, then I can see that working out probably.
But here's the thing about UBI though. During this pandemic, we've already had 3 instances of UBI, and not 100% of people have gotten no stimulus checks yet. I think I know the number is close to
That's not
100%.
That's not what UBI is, though. That's just like
It
government subsidy.
essentially is what
Well,
UBI
no,
is.
because UBI is universal. UMI was, or it was. I think it's you guys used the term UMI. The subsidies were, or the stimulus checks were only for I think people who made less than $75,000 every year. So half the middle class
They
and
were
all the
means
poor people got
tested, so
checks.
that's what it was.
What'd you say? Kind of muffled.
They were means tested. They were means tested. That's why not everyone got it, because they were cut off, especially for the last round. Joe Manchin made sure that less people got it, because they were worried about people who were making way too much money to receive it. The reason people didn't end up getting it is some combination of banking, or they hit whatever the threshold was. I think it was like $200,000 per family, or $100,000 per individual. I don't, or maybe it's $80,000 per individual, whatever, some statistic along that line. That's why the some people didn't end up with it. It's not a reflection of what a UBI program would be, though.
Yeah, so true, King. So true.
I don't
So
think it would
basically,
be
back
that.
to
Go
I'll
on,
let you
Cyrus.
talk right after me, Boy. But basically, I don't think, especially since, like I said, not 100% of the eligible people got their check, but or maybe they did. Maybe it was the means testing. I didn't hear about the means testing, but even though I don't think it should be, I think it should be narrowed down for more specific occasions personally. Like, for example, the People's Prosperity Guaranteed Income Pilot. It's something the city of St. Paul did. And basically what that was it was you could apply, and 150 St. Paul families would get $500 per month if they participated in College Bound St. Cloud. So it's basically a way for people in impoverished cities like St. Paul, and well, St. Paul isn't impoverished, but some I guess, well, anywho, but yeah, some of the more impoverished parts of just the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul in general, it would have a chance to get more affordable college. So I don't think it should just be a big government handout check, because there are people like Joe Manchin who are just going to whittle down the eligibility benefits, but I think that should be more of a state thing. Like, if your state is low in education standards in impoverished areas like Minnesota, then I think that would be better than just more blanketed level, in my opinion.
Oof.
Oops, sorry, does anything
Um,
else have anything to respond to that?
yeah, I think what Cyrus was basically saying that was he did he bring up? 'Cause I'm sorry, I kind of was talking in my chat. Did he bring up the idea that there are places that have lower standard of livings, or needs less money, like single state in
Uh,
America, or would it be like in New York, we would probably give them 2,000 because New York City is pretty expensive or whatever.
sorry, you kind of cut out in the middle there. With all due
Damn it
respect.
all. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So like the same issue that we have with minimum wage is that some people, some states have lower cost of living. That seems like it would be an issue for UBI also, right? Does everybody agree? Like if you give somebody in Kentucky or Mississippi $1,000, that's going to go a lot further than if you're giving somebody in New York City, $1,000.
Yeah,
Is there?
that's why I kind of made the argument that it shouldn't be a federal
Yeah,
blanket
yeah.
level.
I thought that's what
That's
you were
why it
saying.
should be. Actually, I just put a link in the chat of every single city that's actually using some sort of UBI for various reasons, and it varies from state by state depending on their outcomes, and that's why um I'm mainly arguing for UBI more at a state level than a federal level because obviously cost of living is going to be different in each of the
Gotcha.
states.
All right. Yeah, no, I was talking to chat, so I only got part of your conversation, and yeah, I think I'm good on this one. We UBI pilled the conservatives, so
We did our best. Yeah, that's pretty
All
much all
right.
I've got. I mean, I think that's a good roundup.
Yeah, there's we can
I was gonna
Closing
say,
statement.
Petrus.
what?
Sure.
Oh yeah, what's up, bro?
Petrus, fantastic job in that first round. You were, it was one man versus all of us. You kept your cool even more than me. So yeah, props to you, my dude.
Yeah, no problem, bro. It's all good. Good debate, man. You did well too, man.
All
All
right.
right, we can take turns. People can promote their stuff, whatever, closing statements, whatever you want. So I guess we could start with Syrus.
All right. Like I said, I wasn't much of a debater. I felt like when it comes to eloquence, that was definitely more of bit basically just anybody not me. I was quite frankly not good, but you know what? This was a good learning experience, and I enjoyed it. And I kind of want to say that Econoboi stole all my points, but he really didn't. He just said it much more eloquently than I did. So yeah,
Plagiarism.
yeah, you'll be hearing from my lawyers, Econoboi. No, just kidding. But anywho,
Damn.
yeah, good debate, Al.
All right, and then all right, Sneed, do you want to say anything?
Uh, Along with Syrus, I'm kind of sad that he left because I was going to tell him this is my first time debating too.
Yeah.
Uh, it kind of felt good. I liked it.
Do you have anything you want to shout out?
Uh, I would shout out to Jokes Department. He's funny on Twitter. Does a lot of memes. Besides that, nope.
All right. Well,
Thank you for having me on.
yeah,
Everyone have a
thanks.
good night.
You too. All right. Petrus.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at homophobe Petrus and on Trovo at trovo.live/Petrus. Make sure you capitalize the P when you put that in your browser. Um, I argue with people on the internet and post things on Twitter, so that's it.
All right. And then Fresh Faces, New Ideas.
Hey, look, thank you for having this panel. I enjoyed it. I'm actually going to stick through for the rest of the people to finish.
Yep.
I'm Fresh Faces New Ideas. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Fresh Faces New Ideas. You can find me on YouTube at Fresh Faces New Ideas, and you can find me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. Look, I enjoyed this. These are not topics that I generally have covered on my channel. I would love to have conversations with you guys, at least on the minimum wage stuff, because I think that's probably where we had the largest difference, because I never thought of a conversation without having a minimum wage. So that's where I stand. I enjoyed this greatly. I enjoyed talking to all of you. I hope I'll tell my chat, to check this out whenever you post this. But yeah, I look forward to any more of these that you do, or talking to any of the other people on this channel in the future.
All right. Thanks. Connor Boy.
Yeah, so pretty good debate. I think this was my first sort of panel discussion outside of just a regular old one-on-one thing, and it was fun. It was fun. So if anyone likes, pretty much just informative economics content, the occasional economics, politics debate or video, go to Econoboi. On virtually anything, Reddit. I post a ton of stuff on my Reddit account on Ask Economics. So, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube is where I post all my actual content. You can also follow my Twitch channel, I guess, but I haven't presently streamed yet. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, Cluck.
All right, so this debate actually turned out way better than I thought it was going to be. Most of the time when I'm on debates with nothing but lefties, we just spend the entire time agreeing with each other, and the conversation isn't very fun. But this one was actually pretty good. Met a lot of cool people. I think that I've made some context where I can talk to people in the future. If you're interested in seeing that, I'm Liberal Cluck on everything. If I have it, it's Liberal Cluck. So, join my Discord. I have a lot of quite a few right wing people who like to talk there. So if you like talking to right wing people, then that's the place to be because I have a specific type of right wing people. These people can actually function and think pretty well. I appreciate that about them. And yeah, I think that's about it. Econoboy, I subscribe to your YouTube because Economics Explained doesn't post enough for me.
All
That's
right.
fair.
Yeah, it definitely, it's definitely hard to find a lot of right wingers that are willing to go into the panel. I tried. I really did try. Um, but
They are
I found
all
someone.
cowards,
They drop
Picklelyme.
out,
Say it.
or they were what?
Just say that they're all cowards.
Oh yeah, of course. But
Except
no,
for
like
Petrus.
He's right. They are. They are.
um, I had a couple people, but they dropped out. So it is hard. All right, Habeas.
Hi. Thank you, everybody on the panel. Thank you, everyone in the audience. Thank you so much to Picklelyme for
Yep.
hosting. I said it wrong. It's getting late. I have a show called Habeas Humor. I've been doing it since 2017. If you go to habeashumor.com, you got the YouTube links and the podcast links. I talk about law stuff. I talk about other political topics, and I kind of keep it light and do jokes. Actually, the most recent thing we did was the Derek Chauvin trial because prior to the sentencing, I went through all the papers and everything and predicted what the sentence would be, and I actually got it dead on. Not that that was too hard to predict, but nailed it. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Hope to be back sometime soon.
All right, thanks.
Wait.
Thanks
Before
very
you leave,
much.
can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Considering you are a socialist lawyer, would you happen to be Jewish?
Yeah. Well, I mean, genetically.
Let's go. I knew it. Let's go. All right, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
I'm actually atheist and actually like really militant atheist, but like my
Yeah,
field
I
goes
mean
into
like
the
ethnically Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I mean like that's like a stereotype about Jews, right?
Yeah, there are people who disagree with me very vehemently, but I don't think Jewish should be called an ethnicity because there are Jewish people of every ethnicity. I think what people usually mean is Ashkenazi, which is like the Eastern
I agree
European
completely.
community. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's that.
the Ashkenazi Jews aren't even like the related to the Israelites. They're Khazars. It's not even like a
Controversial, but
coherent.
yeah.
It's not even like a coherent identity. But anyway, that's all I wanted to know. Have a good one.
All right. All right. Thank you all for stopping by. Thanks for everyone in chat that's been watching. And yeah, this was fun.
Look, if
All
you
right.
got something to say to me in chat, but you don't join my Discord, you're a cluck, okay? Just
So
you
true.
don't deserve a voice.
All right, but thanks everyone. All right,
We
bye.
should put his Discord in the chat.